Okay, good morning. I would like to call to order the September 9th, 2023 Lake Washington School District Study Board Extended Study Session. Let the record reflect that all of our board members are present. Thank you so much for being here at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning. And what's one second.
Agenda item is
Okay. Sorry, we're having some technical issues.
technology and network systems update.
The first agenda item is going to be our technology and network systems update for board members. We are actually going to be off. Thank you for your patience while we did that. The next topic of our study session today is going to be a policy update to GC10, our digital and social media conduct of board members policy. With the addition of the use of cell phones and then new cell phones for our board members, and then just in general, a discussion around laptop use as well as data storage. We thought it would be appropriate to look at this policy again. Dr. Holman?
Yeah, and so as we were thinking about how do we best position the board to not just be in compliance with OPMA, but actually for us to be able to be responsive to OPMA should there be a request for records and things like that. We know that records requests are increasing every year. The number of requests and the type of things that are requested increase, and so want to make sure that we're positioned with the school board to be able to respond to that as well. And so that's really what this work was about, is to help get us into a place that is responsive, but also as we think about succession planning, knowing that we just had one board member transition out, a new board member transition in, and it's quite an effort to make sure that as many of the historical documents, communications from that director district are available. That's just really difficult, and it shouldn't be that way, because we should have systems in place so that information transitions as easily as possible. And so we're putting some of these things in place so that there's continuity of information and experience for that position, but also those that we're serving. And so that's what these pieces are about. And so as we were thinking about coming online for board members with district-provided cell phones, reached out to our legal counsel to just get their advisement around policy. And so worked with them over the last few weeks. And as we were working through that, they said, well, do you have good language around laptop and network storage and document storage? And I said, we don't really. We have an AUP, but that doesn't get to the level of specificity that they were referring to. And so their advice was, if you're going to do this for cell phones, you might as well just speak to the different areas of storage and access. The sun's pretty bright.
Oh, you're basically in witness protection program.
It's I don't know what to say. And so as we were looking at where's the best place, do we create a new policy for these things, or do we look at the board's policies that are already in place and add to them? And so Leigh and I kind of thought about it and felt like the recent digital and social media conduct policy was the best place to just incorporate this language as well. And so in board docs, you'll see a full draft of the changes that we'll discuss. The proposed update to the title is Technology Use, Storage, and Digital and Social Media Conduct of Board Members. And so did we add? We did not. Okay, so let me go ahead and pull up the policy. And if you want to pull it up and just do a read of it, I would say it's quite lengthy. And you should be able to, from your,
No, but I brought the wrong flower course. Have that for my district.
fair enough.
Well, thank you.
Talk about this already.
You're on a roll, Siri.
So, yes. So I think as you do a read of it, the intent is to just put parameters around specific use of cell phones, use of laptops, when and how, just so there's clarity. And so, questions or comments? Because this is draft board policy, that these would be rules that you're adopting for yourself. And so it's brought here for discussion.
I have a small question first and then a larger one. Page 2, bullet point 2, board members shall enable access to their district-provided email Teams accounts on the district phones. I don't know what those words mean. What do those words mean? Is it that our Outlook, why is one of it?
I believe the intent of that is to say that board members will have the Teams app downloaded on their phone and on, not to provide it to somebody else. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But it sounds like we need clarity a clearer statement there.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. It's got the word shall, so I just. I'm happy to have Teams on phone, but.
You said you had a larger question?
Yeah, how do I put this?
Is your mic on?
No. Yes, it is, I think.
It is.
It is on. So we're trying to put it. Okay, what is? First of all, let's just talk my experience. It's going to be very difficult for me to have another device, the cell phone in particular. I use my phone a lot for my personal. I don't actually. It's not my personal phone. A phone belonging to another organization that I work for. And I guess my question is, I make sure I use the district Outlook to send. I think that the interest here is ensuring that that everything we send is captured on the district's network for OPMA reasons and for retention reasons. If I'm using my personal phone using the Outlook Exchange, how is that a problem? I guess.
So is your question?
Because this is very explicit that going forward we are all agreeing we will not be doing that, and I will then be taking out my district Outlook off of my personal phone based on the policy here.
That is one proposal, yes.
Well, that's the words that are that is the proposal.
Yes.
And I guess if that's what we all agree to, fine. I wonder what is that accomplishing? What is that accomplishing? Like what is if everything's being logged? If I appreciate that if I'm using my personal phone to send text messages for district business, that is not being logged.
Correct.
And that I appreciate that, and that is something we should all make a practice of not doing. But using other devices that have Outlook, or some sort of web-based thing that is logging in our network, that doesn't strike me as much of a problem. I don't know how to put that into words here.
So you're viewing if it's web-based, then you could access from a different component,
Yeah.
right?
So if the information is in the cloud,
Yeah.
and it's being sent and accessed from the cloud, and that cloud is in the district's ownership, it's the same thing whether it's a district device or a personal device, because it's still not coming from being sent or archived in your personal information.
Right. And if there's, I think I will be a more effective board member if I can use a variety of devices that, as long as it's all being captured and logged, to access cloud-based district. Do those words make sense? Okay.
I think the nuance around that is if you are using a personal cell phone device to access your district email, say during a board meeting, and then you have a question and you Google something on your phone, if somebody requests to know what
I was Googling
the
myself.
board members were Googling on their devices, you would potentially then lose access to your personal device during the time to try to fulfill that public record request.
Yeah.
So then I think that's what we're trying to avoid, is the inconvenience of having personal devices taken away. But then there's also there's lines in here about not deleting your search history, not deleting your call history on your device, your district device, because technically all of those are considered records in your board member capacity. So that, I mean, on a personal device, there's no way to, other than asking board members to comply. And I mean, you can have your own setup on your phone, right? Like, I don't have all of my text messages living in perpetuity on my personal device because it would take terabytes of data.
Well, and that's part of it too, right, is that text and phone call.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I guess my question, Eric, would be the inconvenience. I understand of like carrying multiple devices, and then I also understand being able to access your email from different devices. All of that is still captured, but then you would still potentially have text messages and calls, so you would still have to have that second device.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I might get over it.
Yeah.
I'm like, look, this is like, it's new technology. It's like scary, and I don't want to do it, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
Like, I agree, it's inconvenient for everybody. I don't want to carry another phone around with me, but
Yeah.
to me personally, it'd be a bigger inconvenience to lose my personal phone for any amount of time.
Okay.
Any other? Yes.
Couple of things. Since I wanted to have this on the recording, how much are we expending to set up all these accounts, these phone accounts, and new devices?
I believe it was.
I realize that's a pittance by comparison to the overall budget, but in these budget-tight times, it seems a bit much. Just the idea that we're adding something that's going to take away from some of the budget, perhaps. You see where I'm going? It's negligible in comparison to the overall scheme, but in trying to be as frugal as possible, it just seems a little bit odd.
Yeah, each phone plan is $30 a month.
Okay, and the phones,
Free.
Those were free with the
Okay.
account set up.
okay. How often have we had our devices or our accounts or our emails FOI'd in the past, or whatever you want to call it, by anyone?
Oh,
I mean,
When you
I don't
say-
recall in 10 years mine having been requested. Now, perhaps you went and searched it without me knowing it. I don't know.
yeah, so when there's a public records request, our team has access to all email accounts, and so they're doing those searches and providing records.
But wouldn't I have been notified if my records were being researched?
No. And so I would have to ask the team to tell me how many times specific board members have been requested over the last X number of years.
I understand.
And so I can't give you an answer to.
I understand it's a desire to prevent future problems. I question whether or not we're creating an animal that we don't need to create, or a rule we don't need to create. I could be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. But it just seems like it's trying to do hurricane prevention in Oklahoma. You don't need it.
So are you proposing that we don't be in compliance with the law?
No, I'm not suggesting we don't be in compliance with the law, and
Could you
that's a
clarify?
rather crude way of putting my question. I think it's. I was not suggesting that whatsoever. I was suggesting that I just want to know the need, why we created the need. We have not had cell phones for God knows how long. They were issued. People that know us will be calling our old cell phone numbers, are testing our old cell phone numbers. Will be email now. The email address migrates over. That doesn't really matter. That'll be a cinch. But it just seems like we're creating a monster that we don't need to create. And I don't think that's being in compliance with the law. It seems just to be an intrusion.
Well, so I'm posing this question to all of our board members, and I'm not asking for a response. It's just a reflection of your own practices. And the question would be, for however long you've been on the board, if it's been more than 7 years or less than 7 years, for however long you've been on the board, do you maintain all board related text messages for 7 years back on your personal devices and stored somewhere that's accessible for the team to access when there is a public records request? Because that is actually a legal requirement. That is something that we are obligated to do. And so having a district phone is trying to be in compliance with that requirement. And so I'd posit that we're not trying to create obstacles for some future unforeseeable event that might never happen. We're actually just trying to be in compliance with the law. Lisa, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what Eric was talking about. Yeah, the phone makes sense. And yes, carrying 2 devices will be a little annoying, but I get that. But also under the laptop text, with not using the district laptop for, board members must use the district laptop for all board and district business, and board members may not use any personal devices to conduct district or board business. Getting clarity on that, I understand in the context of a board meeting, but yes, like I probably similar to Eric, I really don't want to carry 2 laptops. And so being able to access board email or being able to see that come through for my personal practice is really important. And echoing that, like, it's still going through the district. So from a records request, it doesn't matter. I don't understand why it would matter whether I'm sending from Outlook from a personal laptop or from the district laptop. And even like web search history, I have a separate profile in Edge that I can access anywhere that saves that history. Like that can get saved to the cloud too. So yes, in a board meeting, I would not do that. I only have this one laptop with me here today. But yeah, just maybe getting a little bit more clarity on what's the intent with the laptops, and just making sure that I'm in compliance. Another practice that I have is like forwarding board meeting invites and so on to my work account so that my work calendar gets blocked, and I'm not clear from this policy whether that would be conducting district or board business on a personal device. It seems a little ambiguous. So I think I have the intent, which is that board, as I'm communicating as a board member, that should be in the district's cloud, if you will, or accessible to the district. But just maybe getting a little bit more clarity so that there's no confusion over, some of these places where it's in line with the intent, but maybe not with the policy as it's stated right now. Hopefully that made sense.
Does, I believe with this policy, as it reads today, wouldn't allow forwarding to work email and personal email, because you're essentially then creating a record on your work account, because that really is board business. So I think that's how it reads today, and so that's why we're discussing.
Yeah. And if that's the case, I mean, like, I have workarounds. I think it would be fine for me to create a block in my work calendar that's called stuff, which would accomplish the purpose of, somebody not scheduling a meeting over something that I've committed to do for the board, but without it being visibly yes.
Right.
So just getting clarity there would be helpful. One other thing I will add too, as a new board member, is that all of this, like, I think that this is important enough that we should have a separate discussion during onboarding. That's like very much around, like, we talked a lot about sort of overall policies and so on, but getting very specific about, how does OPMA and PRA show up, like literally, like some of these questions of, understanding the law, but like, how does that work in the district?
So I think it's because of the timing of your appointment, but normally the board boot camp, where you do the OPMA training, they go through a lot of like examples and stuff, which will be really helpful, but you'll already know it all by then. Did you have a response, or did you want to add something to what
I
Lisa
agree
said?
with everything Lisa said. I really need the ability to have board
Meetings.
meetings on my work calendar. To have somebody else that I work with monitoring that to make sure I'm not missing things.
Siri?
So when there's a web-based concept to it, I think you're fine. So, I mean, like right now, I'm accessing board docs through my phone and that, but board docs is all saved and taken care of. Same as a calendar, I'm not as concerned about the forwarding of a calendar invite to your work calendar, that is something that would be in violation of a public records account, or, because that really is informational, and oftentimes that doesn't matter.
So OPMA isn't about it. There is no rule in OPMA that says you can't use a personal account. It's once you use a personal account, and a personal account is anything outside of the district's access. Once you've done that, you then have created a record that is now accessible through OPMA. And so for what we say to our staff is, if you're using your personal email for work business, then you need to be prepared to provide access to your personal email if there's a public records request. That's true for me, that's true for teachers, anyone. And so so it's not that it's illegal to use a personal account, it just creates a personal impact.
Right. So where I would start is I think it's important to be doing the shift in being able to have the cell phone component. I think there's a variety of pieces around that. I think having a phone number that's specific to this board position as opposed to my personal cell is vital, because now it goes with whoever comes again into the position. So it creates a continuity, so I think that's a key component. This is not uncommon for many elected boards at this point to have assigned cell phones for individuals because of the need to be able to respond to things that come through. Until texting becomes web-based and we can access it through another way, I don't see any option behind not doing this, and I think it's the right move to make. I do think the pieces that have been brought up that were key about web access components, that if I can get to Outlook through my phone, why not allow me to access my email that way as long as all my emails send out through there? That to me doesn't seem to be a problem. So maybe it's not so much the device as to where it's stored and archived is really more the way to speak to it than about the device. So those are the pieces. I appreciate that people have old cell phone numbers. We're going to have to be diligent about sort of re-educating and bringing that forward to a change. I think this is a level of professionalism at the board that it's worth it to do. And how we work to integrate it's going to be the challenge. I think shared calendars, I don't know if there's a way that you can share your district calendar across, so therefore you're not actually sending, it just shares. I'm not really good with that cloud world, so I will leave that to you. But appreciate the challenge of trying to balance. I used to carry a work phone as long as so I would never have district stuff on my work phone when I had that. And at that point I would have been carrying 3 phones if we had district phones. So I think it's the right move to make. I think it guarantees transparency, ability to comply with any request that comes through. I think it allows for continuity. And I think it's right. I think perhaps looking at how that gets rewritten in the policy to address web access capacity, because that's just the reality. We all use multiple tools, our phones and iPads, the district laptop. Doesn't matter so much if it's web-based. It can be any device that comes into it. If it's not web-based, then it must be a district device. I know those are the sorts of things that I would think about.
So right now, on a personal laptop, I could add my work Outlook account to the Outlook app. It's still going through our district storage. It's still, and yet there's also times where you hit new email, but you're in the wrong email, and it still populates the email addresses that you're sending to. So you then accidentally send from your personal account. And so maybe that's just a practice thing. We want to be sure that as we're going, so there's still, the storage is still happening, but we've then just created a personal, we've used our personal account to send something that we intended to send through work or district accounts. So that's why I don't use my personal laptop for work business.
Mark?
Okay, and this is, again, it's technical. Luckily, I've never had my email account put on my phone or on my personal, because God knows I wouldn't know how to do it, okay? But second of all, so that makes that easy. But when the calendars come out, and I have, and Teresa has always sent the calendar notices to both of my accounts, so that way I can easily put them on personal a calendar to make sure my family knows when I'm supposed to be where. God knows I don't remember to ever always tell them. But we can't do that anymore. I can't automatically go to my calendar. Is that correct? Because this way I know exactly, I don't have to open up my district calendar to be able then to forward that appointment to my personal account. It's just a matter of being able to have everyone know where the hell I am, to be quite frank. Can we no longer keep a calendar account?
So that was the question that both Lisa and Eric asked. Given this policy language, the answer would be no. So, but there was a request to look into that to see if there's different language. So,
Yeah, because I'd like to be able to be quite frank. If my calendar can't be on my personal calendar also, then basically I'm going to have to tell my wife, oh, by the way, don't schedule me on X date from time to that time, because then we'll basically just have to recreate it.
right.
The other question comes up if a citizen, a resident within our district, calls me up on whatever the issue is, and whether it's personal or whatever, and they said, oh, by the way, what's this I hear about? Do I say, okay, excuse me, well, we have to now disconnect this phone call, and you need to call me on my district account? That seems a little rude to the, when we're trying to be as accessible, we're trying to make ourselves, our outreach to the community, that just seems a bit it seems like we're trying to make it difficult for the public to have that conversation be natural, or
Yeah,
to have that conversation be eased.
Yeah, I think the spirit of the policy is to conduct board business on district devices, district network systems, and there's also the reasonable person rule of transition. I would say that if someone reaches out to you and would like to schedule a phone call, that you would call them from your district phone. And if you're in a conversation with someone and they bring up district business, you're not going to, hang up here to call there. To me, that's the nature of the transition. So it may be easier for whomever replaces Siri to make this transition, because it'll be listed on the website. It will be the new, all of it will be the new profile, as opposed to sitting board members who have relationships. Do you have any additional thoughts on that?
I was thinking about when I have a close friend that's on Redmond City Council, and she and I will get together for personal reasons, for fun, to hang out as friends. And she and I will communicate on her personal cell phone. And then if I wanted to ask her a question related to schools or the city, she asks me to call her on her city cell phone. So I think there's intent where you can, things will happen. Like, she might ask me a random question when we're having a personal conversation. I'm not going to ask her to hang up and call me back on this other line. But there are clear times when I would like to talk to you about something that is related to the city or related to the school board. And then we communicate over different lines of communication at that point. Because she's there subject to the same laws as we are. And I think that that's probably a practice that most of them operate under, hopefully all of them. Eric?
I'm wondering
Yep.
if, I'm wondering if there's a way to carve out, as long as there's I'm just reflecting the calendar part, which is really for me, the biggest impediment to being like, this is fine, this is great. If there's a way, if there's a way to carve out, as long as there's a duplicate, because I make sure that, like, I guess everyone knows, well, the public knows now, I have Teresa send calendar invites to both my work and my district, and then the calendar I then accept for both the work and the district, so the event goes on both calendars. So as long as there's a duplicate, I wonder if that is sufficient, and if there's a way to carve that out in policy. I don't know if that's like quite a mealy-mouthed policy way of drafting, but I just wonder if that would accomplish. I'd be curious to know from the people who actually know the PRA whether that would be sufficient. And also, just as a practical matter, if the only public record that is being created on my work account as calendar invites, that's not going to be that problematic for my firm. So,
Lisa?
Yeah, I think there's obviously the law, and then there's this board policy that we're trying to draft. And the way that the board policy reads, it prevents us right now from doing that, because we must use the district laptop. We may not use any personal devices. I think what I'm understanding is that from a law perspective, it's actually not against the law. It's just that it opens up a degree of risk. If I am strictly on district devices, I know I'm fine, and my personal devices are going to be completely separate. If as soon as I step off of a district device, I need to be aware that there is some risk involved. And obviously there's a different risk from forwarding a single, or like forwarding meeting invites versus having an in-depth text conversation about a definite district issue. So yeah, I think from a policy perspective, just navigating that and coming up with something for ourselves that is obviously aligned with the law, but also gives that flexibility for board members to work the way that they want to work, as long as it's legal. To be clear, So I think that's what I'm struggling with right now. Is just that I understand the law. I totally want to be in compliance with the law, and there are times when I might be okay with opening myself up to a small degree of risk for a very large personal benefit, and that's going to look different, I think, for each of us.
Mark, did you have anything else? Okay.
I am generally fine with this, by the way.
After all that. After all that.
It's annoying and it's scary, right?
Yeah.
It's the change that, the last thing I want is more technology in my life right now. So, what are you gonna do?
So I think what I'm hearing is generally there's consensus around moving in this direction. We've got some feedback and concerns around web-based applications that we use, like email and board docs, and whether or not we need to strictly adhere to district devices for the use of those items. If we can maybe go back and rewrite a couple components of this.
And I think what was brought today was probably the most conservative approach possible.
Yes.
And So we'll work through this. The idea was to have it on consent agenda on September 11th. Yeah,
Maybe October.
I think it's October 2, I think is our next board meeting. So we'll get it out to the board prior to that, so if there's questions or anything. And we can put it on non-consent if the board wants to discuss it as well.
Yes, Mark.
A quick question, off the technology issue. If someone tags us on Facebook, and because they're having a discussion on the parents' page or whatever, now how do we comply, but yet also not ignore our public? I can say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that on Facebook. You'll have to email me at XXX. Now, that's going to look really bad to the public. It's going to look, oh, you're going to shrug your shoulders, you don't care. I'm sorry, that's what it sounds like.
I think you can inform them nicely of the law. I mean, I guess I'm not on social media, so I don't have this problem, right? Because I've personally elected, because I personally just don't like social media. So I guess I can't speak from experience. I can speak from what I would do if I was potentially in that position, and I would inform them that I legally cannot discuss this because it's creating a public record, and they can email me at my district email.
Our current policy speaks to this too.
Yeah, I think our social media use policy has something.
And it allows responses, clarifying in writing, we're speaking as an individual, not as a school board member, nor as an official school board spokesperson. What should a school board member wish to post on social media as a school board member? This shall be done through district sanctioned and retained accounts. So, yeah.
And I think all of this goes back to intent, because the world of communication is much different than when OPMA was first drafted. You think about the substantive changes that have occurred during that time. And so you can imagine, I don't do social media, but I am approached in many different ways through many different avenues. And so I always try and filter people back to a method, manner, or venue that I have deemed as the best way to operate. And so I would offer, if someone is reaching out to you on social media, again, it's not about ending the conversation or anything like that. It's about, inviting someone in a place that's good for you and in alignment with records retention and things like that, knowing that we all get communication in so many different ways. And so it's, I would imagine people are, on social media would reach out quite often. It's always about directing them back to the best place for you to have that conversation, knowing that social media isn't the best venue to dialogue back and forth as a board member. So that's what I would offer. It's not about, do or don't. It's about getting to the place that A, is best for you and appropriate for you, but also in alignment with policy and retention.
When I get a request from a citizen, a parent, I'll put it that way, I will usually give them the link to the board policy or where they can find. Back when we had the old, I forget now what the thing was that people would send in their questions.
Let's Talk.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Let's
Yep.
Talk. It was always hard for me to refer them to Let's
Yeah.
Talk when I couldn't remember the name of it. But and I would also then point them out where they could find the policy, or who perhaps they should ask. If they had a specific question about transportation, I'd say call the transportation people. If they had a question about curriculum, I'd send them to whoever was in charge of curriculum at that time. It seems to me that should be kosher. Am I correct? Also, when you put out a notice on the Facebook page of the district, knowing that it doesn't reach all these audiences, especially the private pages, I'll often boost your announcement to make sure that it reaches everyone where they might be, because I don't think there's a whole lot of people that sit on the district Facebook account just waiting for us to make an announcement, or sit on their emails just waiting for us to say something.
And that probably also goes to what is board business and what is, you're a board member and you have this information.
It's public service, if you will.
Do you know what I mean? And so it's, board business would be business that directly relates to decisions of the board, decisions of the district, things like that. And so it's also determining, so if someone says, I'm looking for, I don't like X curriculum, telling them, contact the district and this is the person, that really isn't board business per se.
Okay. I just wanted to get clarification. I
Yeah,
want to make sure
yeah.
I'm in compliance. I don't want to, God forbid, I would ever ignore a law like the speed limit.
Lisa?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. Again, speaking as a new board member and one who does use social media a fair bit, but like very, I mean, even leading up in the last few months, knowing that I was a candidate, just being very thoughtful about that. But yeah, this is, I think, again, where I'm struggling a little bit with the language of the policy. Like, just to give an example, after the last meeting where I was appointed, somebody did a post in a group that I've been a member of for years as a parent, saying, tag Lisa Guthrie, congratulations, or, whatever, she was appointed. And it's very awkward to be like, just not say anything, and at the same time that I read through GC10 and I was like, is this even okay to do? And just to say like, thank you, and if you want to reach out, here's my email address, my lwc.org email address, to be clear. I don't really have a solution. I'm just saying I'm struggling a little bit, I think, with the language.
And that's where, well, it's board work versus, like, I had a personal accomplishment. And so, for me, someone posts that, then, I don't know, do you do a thumbs up and a smiley face? I don't even know. And thank you all, I'm very excited, here's my email address. And then, because you're not conducting any business, it would be like if someone walked in and congratulated you in person, you wouldn't ghost them and just walk away. You would say, thank you, I'm excited. Well, okay, it depends on the person. But you would thank them, you would say, I'm excited about this, here's my priority. But that's not board business. That's the personal side of you being excited that you've had a personal accomplishment. That's how I view it.
Well, the other thing on these conversations, to be quite frank, unless you really are foolish, you don't want it to be dragged into one of those long conversations on a Facebook account, because, to be quite frank, there's no actual answer for they will be happy unless you say, yes, you're right. And I do that with my family members, to be quite frank, when they tag me. So it's rare that you would ever have that. It's more often a situation of being a traffic cop to send them to the right place. And that they really appreciate. Or they ask, why is... I had a person call me one time who had... we had, for some reason, locked a gate to the elementary school during the summer. And that's where the seniors used to like to walk the track, because they thought... that was a safe place for them to walk. They knew exactly how many miles they actually walked. So they knew the length of the track. And I said, gee, I don't know why it's locked. It may be a security precaution. I'll check. I checked. It wasn't. Turns out somebody just forgotten and left the thing locked at the end of the spring. So it's that sort of what I consider public service.
Celia?
So it sounds like that social media piece needs a little massaging to be able to address the ability to directly, as opposed to board business, sort of what you were talking about. So I think that might be a piece to put in there to sort of clarify that. I will also say, though, as a elected official, your ability in which to be able to engage on social media is shifted because of that. Because even as you speak as an individual, people still know you're a board member. But that is the same as, I don't disagree. If it's a conversation you hold with somebody personally in the grocery store, then how is this any different in some regards? But I do think because we are under rules of OPMA and Public Records Act, with the new communication tools, we do have to think through that. So appreciate your thoughtfulness, really, in going through that. And so if we can clarify a little bit more about that, maybe that would be helpful.
It's like last week, one of our frequent flyers to our public comment came up to me in the grocery store on our ecology, our environmental policy, and saying, she keeps coming, and I said, please keep coming. And I said, because if we have an answer for you, we'll give it. And I said, you'd be very happy to know what we have done, especially in the building construction stuff and so forth. And to be quite frank, the conversation went on probably longer than either she or I had intended it to do, but that tends to happen when you talk to Stuart.
Okay, so if that's the final item on this topic?
So it does sound like there's a request for some additional language to be added to the policy around social media. So
yes, just some clarification.
yes, so I'll do that, and my note to myself is to have that out to the board by September 21.
Sounds good. Thank you. So we'll move on to our next topic, which is the Board of Directors budget. Dr. Holman.
Great. And so as we're thinking about, budget and making sure that we're clear on expenses, you can imagine centrally we're also digging into our own internal budgets to understand what are areas that can be reduced, what are things that do need to be right-sized because costs have increased and maybe we haven't increased budgets to accommodate for that. The board has some of those items as well that we'll talk about. And so just want to provide some clarity around the board's budget and then some of the different components in that, as well as a discussion of RCW 28A 343-400, which is board compensation. And so I think you can reasonably see this. So there are some things in the board's budget that are highlighted in yellow at the top, which per state accounting codes are required to be in the board's budget. And so these aren't discretionary funds for the board. They are just required to live within the board's budget. And so you can see things like auditor fees, election expenses, a line item for legal fees, and then some staff salaries and benefits that do need to be there. You can see there's also two line items there that are discretionary. One is the board association dues, so that really is WASDA, and board training supplies conference costs, which that's for a variety of things. If we then go down below to under the blue shading, that is the line item expenses, and these were estimates for 22-23. I was sent the actuals, but the actuals are not correct, and so because there were a few things that weren't coded correctly, some things got charged to the superintendent's budget rather than the board's budget, and so I just want to make sure that those are clear, so when I send you the actuals for 22-23, it does represent, the full expense of the WASDA conference and things like that. So you can see here, there are a number of pieces that come out of the board's budget. One, dues for Rotary for Sammamish, Kiwanis, and we also have Eastside Human Services, which was coded incorrectly but is part of the board's budget. It's $3,000 annually. And so that when you see the next version of the budget, you'll see that as a line item as well.
Is Eastside Pathways anything that we pay a membership to? It isn't, is it?
It's not.
Okay.
No. And we have a discussion about that is what, like, kind of the overall, and maybe that's part of this this budget piece. And then we have two line items for associations that the board is a part of. First is NSBA, National School Board Association, comes in around $8,600 annually. And then WASDA, we have both the dues for the association membership, and then there's two services that we receive. So the dues are $40,000 a year, and then we pay about $1,900 for those two services. One of those services is access to their model policies, which for us administratively is key. I know when we had the update to the student board rep policy, I know we accessed the model policies for that. So we use the model policies for really our policy work quite often. And then I am just
Their legal journal.
it's something else, and I'm just not remembering what it is. So, anyways, so but it's another, useful piece. Mark?
You might want to know, and it goes back so many years, after we missed that one bond by a point and a half or whatever it was, and then Superintendent Tracy Pierce and I had a discussion, why aren't we involved in the civic club? She said, well, I'm a member of this club and that club and that club. And I said, well, do you attend? She said, I don't have time. And I said, well, I'll attend for you if you just want to transfer it over. I said, that's probably why it ended up still in your budget, to be quite frank, because it was originally her membership.
In some of this, in good budget times, maybe you don't pay as much attention to the line item pieces, and so we're kind of doing that across the board and with the board as well. Then you can see down below under training and whatnot, we set aside about $7,000 annually for the WASDA conference, and there's years where we use that, and there's years we don't, because there's years where we don't all go, or it's in Bellevue. Like this upcoming year, we won't spend $7,000 on the WASDA conference. We'll have the conference fees, but then, board members and superintendent will go home at night. And so there's no need for additional accommodations. You can see some of the other pieces there. Consultation with WASDA, the February conference, which is the legislative conference that we attend. We set dollars aside for the board retreat annually in the board's budget. And then you can see some other pieces, things like catering. So just making sure that there's, food and beverage for prior to study session. We set funds aside for that. And so all of that totals $85,000 for a budget that is set up to be right around $59,000. And so one of the biggest differences here you'll see is board association dues set aside at $32,000 in the budget, yet we're spending almost $50,000 between WASDA and NSBA. So that's one of those situations where we have, line item budgets that haven't been right-sized for years, yet there's some costs that are borderline required costs that need to move forward. You can see then on the right side, that's a look-ahead budget for 23-24. And there's a couple things I want to point out. One is centrally, we did an across-the-board 5% cut to every budget, knowing that we would have to have some conversations around various pieces in many departments, because there's some things you just can't cut. And so you can see here, board association dues went from $32,000 to $30,000, and they will once again be $50,000 this year. So that's one of those line items that you just can't do a 5% cut because you needed to do a 20% increase already. So those are the things that we're working through right now, but this just represents that 5% cut. And then you can see over on the right, everything is the same as part of the planned move ahead budget. with one exception, and that is the addition of board compensation, which is a conversation we'll have in a few minutes. And what would that total be if all board members accessed the total compensation available to them under the revised codes of Washington is $27,000, and that includes the stipend and compensation amount plus required taxes that have to be paid on it.
We're actually compensated?
So
I was going to say, you
so-
owe me some back pay, pal.
and so we'll talk about that piece, because I've hopefully I've educated myself a little bit more about that over the last week or so.
So quick question, so the WASDA dues, I was on the WASDA board at the time that those got increased initially, because the WASDA dues had not been addressed for many, many years. And so there was a lot of work by the board. It was also brought to the annual conference. I spoke at it in regards to the support of these annual dues, because it really was a much more equitable approach at being able to address the dues across the state. So that smaller school districts, they have a much smaller budget than the larger school districts did. So we really worked at creating a different formula that was much more transparent. I could tell you what it was if I had my computer, but I don't.
I'm glad to hear you're not conducting business.
I'm not touching anything. And so those are dues that we pay. Those, the benefit we get from WASDA is phenomenal. It looks like the budget wasn't increased appropriately. Our budget in that. So that to me was a mistake made 3 to 4 years ago. That should not be looking at in towards the total budget now as I look at things, so.
Correct. And that's the work we're doing right now across all department level budgets, and let's just call this a department level budget for now, because you can see in between 2019 and 2020, that's when the shift occurred. And what WASDA does is they look at our certified instructional staff FTE to put us in a cost band. And I haven't received the bands yet to know. We're band Q, but I don't really know what that means compared to others. But I would imagine if your index school district and your, CIS, your certified instructional staff FTE is 11, like you can really only pay so much out of your district's budget and be able to participate in WASDA. So I'm assuming that was the conversation.
Very much so. I was trying to be able to be much more equitable in its approach. Also, there was a lot of conversation at that point of the value WASDA was starting to provide from a state level in regards to advocacy work, in regards to training. So the whole onboard that came on after that and all the board training that you see now, that was partially possible because of this addressing with dues. So it was actually a lot of support statewide to be able to really strengthen public education and board work, and WASDA has a key role in that. So that was the reason in which for the increase as well.
By the way, you missed the Guinness Book of World Records for putting a number of acronyms in one sentence. You only did put 2. If you get 5, we get you an award.
Okay, I'm working on it.
Just a quick clarifying question on the previous slide. I saw cell phones at 150 annually.
Sorry, I need to do it times 12.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure about that. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
that was my error.
No worries. Just clarify, because I thought you said it was $30 a month.
Presentation, and then I'm just trying to make.
If you have a
If I have
question, I would say ask.
Comment
Yeah.
on some items, but I don't know if are we taking that now? I don't want to derail things. And
Why don't you just comment, and then if it's going to be spoken to later, or
Sure. What value, if any, are we getting out of NSBA? As a
another.
board, I guess this is a question for the board.
Comment noted.
I am not aware as a board, maybe it's my own failing, but as a board member now for 7 years, I'm not aware of any value that we as a board have ever gotten out of NSBA. I know that some board members have attended conferences in the past and maybe have brought back some learnings that have somehow indirectly benefited the board. But my comment is, if we're looking to cut costs, that would be the first thing I would want to cut.
So we are going to be talking about associations in a future slide, so we can circle back to that. Do you have another comment?
I don't know if we are going to talk about.
Well, we were going to talk about,
We're going to talk about like membership
Yes.
but not associations per se. So
because I thought we were going to talk about cubes versus, like, we were going to look up whether or not we had to be part.
yeah, CUBE is part of NSBA. So to be part of CUBE, you have to be a member of
part
NSBA.
Okay. So yes, no, we can talk about it now then.
So
That's
why don't we
fine.
have that conversation now?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to let Siri begin this discussion.
So I guess I get it, that there, and actually NSBA has a lot of questions right now in regards to some of the work that's going on. So that's not a new piece, and there are several states that have actually pulled out of NSBA at this point. I will say, when I've gone to the conference 3 to 4 times, I think, over my time on here, the value, and I've gone to the actual advocacy work that Mark has also attended in Washington, D.C., the value of being able to capture a national perspective and hear from districts that are, because we are such a large district in Washington State, we are not a large district anywhere else. And so a lot of some of the challenges we find are talked about at NSBA more effectively. I also found that typically some of the issues that were brought up there, we were about 3 years behind. That those issues hadn't made it out here yet, but they were coming. And so it sort of gave you a heads up of what was going on sort of in that world. So, I had the option in Boston to do things, so learned a lot about transportation, learned about funding things and how you could do things differently. So a lot of that work actually has informed my work on the board as to what I do. And there are boards, I know that all their board members go to NSBA. I don't know if they still do. They were. But that was a piece of professional development that they viewed. So whether it's NSBA or something else, but being able to have a national perspective of some of the public education school issues that come up, you start to see those as they come through our setting as well, and you're a little more prepared to what's going on, and you then have other resources that you can pull from. I mean, there was some fascinating work done with CTE that I was able to bring back and be able to talk to that and how it goes forward. So there's lots of different things. So you don't have to be a member. You can go to the conference without being a member. You just have a slightly higher fee, if I remember correctly.
That's right. I'm looking at it.
So what's the gain from membership? I don't know. I will say from the legal side, I know the February conference was highly valuable in my opinion as well, from their equity side and from the advocacy work, as it really touched on the legal and law piece that was driving a lot of things and sort of legislation you had to be aware of how it was moving in different ways so that you could respond to that. It's also WASDA was very active in being able to shape that group who went to that February one, so was able to have a much stronger voice, being able to act as a state. So whether we have to be a member to do any of that, that's the piece I don't know.
When it comes to the advocacy program that they have in January, February, whichever it may be for the given year, I find that, one, it's an effective way for us to reach out to members with a broader group so they don't hear it just like Washington. When we go to see Del Bene or Schreier's office and they see a dozen folks because they have that many districts in their own district, if you will, it makes a greater impact. We were able to pull off Representative Schreier off the floor to have a conversation, whereas if I'd have gone on my own or one of us had gone on our own, I doubt very seriously she had taken the time to walk out in the hallway and spend half an hour with us. The other thing is having us as a member of an organization. I can speak to this as a former employee of a national association. The American Medical Association represents all doctors. 49% or less now actually belong to the AMA. And that point is always brought out when you're testifying before Congress or whatever hearing. Oh, you don't really represent everybody. Well, yes, they do. They're just a lot of freeloaders, if you will. The same way when NSBA would go and testify, it shows a greater strength and breadth of their membership if as many of the state and local districts belong. It gives them more oomph, if you will, when it comes to policy direction. This comes just from as a staffer, when we work that way. I had more oomph with the media because I was AMA and not Alice Body Shop.
If we were to not be a member, it would cost $200 additional per board member to attend these things. So, I mean, I see no value in membership, so I would like to eliminate that from the budget.
I would just say to recognize what Mark had said about the value of strengths in numbers. I would just like to say I think that was a very good point, and is something to also think about in going forward.
It's something I lived with for 10 years, and it really was a thing that really was difficult. The other thing is, too, that there are other memberships that we have that are local, if you will. I think we have a responsibility to the East Side Forum as the second largest school district in the state. We should be considered a leader, and we ought to act like one. One of the reasons why we go to the various civic clubs is because we wanted to get a better grounding in the communities. In fact, I think we ought to be members of others, to be quite frank, and have it spread out throughout the district or throughout the board.
So I'm going to ask you to pause because we are going to talk about the service organizations as a whole.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were all
No.
together.
So
Pardon me.
just to wrap up the association component.
Rewind.
Eric.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Hold those
well,
thoughts.
Mark reminded me that I also wanted to cut D-side human services.
Okay, so please hold. Hold on your cuts. Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to add? Okay. I will say my sole experience with NSBA was my first year as a board member, and I went and attended the national conference. I will put the caveat out there that it was the first in-person conference after COVID, and so I did feel like there was probably an impact to the quality of the conference because of that. There were things that I learned, and like in particular, I remember some of the workshops around like AI and things that school districts were doing. I mean, this is 2 years ago, and they were already leaps and bounds ahead of kind of what we were discussing at a board level. And so I agree with Siri that there is value there. I would be interested in probably continuing to attend conferences in the future with or without a membership. At this point in time, with our projected $56,000 discretionary budget versus our total board association dues, I think it is probably something to consider whether or not we should continue to pay for that membership.
Is this a good point that we should have a final break in between these two discussions?
Yeah, I think that's fine. We can take a 5-minute break. People can noodle on this until we get back. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. So we can go ahead and continue our discussion around our association dues.
So it's a line item budget, so I believe that we can take advisement from the board, and then probably you, Eric, and I could get together and manage the line item budget. There's no board
Formal
action
action
required to manage a line item budget. So this is the line item budget that you're seeing, as opposed to
Sorry.
So the board's requirement to adopt a budget is the F-195, and then there's a question of, do we need to have a board action to modify the board's line item budget? And
We believe the answer
You're correct. Because that would mean every time a line item budget is adjusted for departments, the board would have to take action, and that is not, that's not the case.
So I would be fine with taking out the National School Boards Association. One is I don't think we are utilizing their services in any way that, from the membership standpoint, that we can't access the services we are using without being a member. Recognizing it does lessen the voice, and understand that.
Mark?
I would suggest from the idea that if we want to be a leader, we have to work among the leaders. And to diminish their impact on a national basis is not fulfilling our duty on a national level. I would suggest, too, that by comparison to perhaps other line items that are perhaps utilized as much as this one, it probably is a drop in the bucket. I think that for us to be an effective member of advocacy on the team for WASDA, because that's really where it brings in the strength. We then strengthen WASDA's impact on NSBA policy as well. And that strengthens our ability to represent our parents and our students.
I would just add, I'm not sure being a member limits our ability to continue that engagement and advocacy. So that would be my only piece. I don't know for sure, honestly, but I do know NSBA has a variety of services that I don't see that we're utilizing. So that's the question as to whether or not membership is of the value or not. I believe we can still continue with the work that we do with the Equity and Advocacy Conference in January, February. There's no reason attending the NSBA is still possible. I think we just, there we go.
If we don't continue and other school boards across the nation take up that same attitude, you'll see NSBA evaporate, as well as our impact nationally.
I think for me, you have to take into consideration what we're getting out of our membership, and at this point, I cannot articulate that we are getting anything out of that membership. In the future, there's always the option to re-register with them as well. Potentially, if we do see value or if something changes within the organization, that it would make sense for us to be a member again. I don't think that there's any rules about if you cancel your membership, you can never join back. So I would also lean towards removing it from our budget at this time.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too. I definitely hear that, and it's really hard. But we're asking our whole district to make some really tough cuts. And yeah, it's hard for me to justify that really large line item this year. And I think what I'm hearing is that we can revisit this in the future. Yeah.
Okay. So then we can move on to then the other area, which is our service organizations that we are part of. The big one that was missing from that summary was the Eastside Human Services Forum, and that membership, the cost of membership for that is about $3,000 a year. In general, I think rather than discussing kind of the value of an individual organization for the purposes of this conversation, I think there's an interest in discussing an overall strategy around how our board should be engaging or not engaging with service organizations in our community in general, whether or not it's a decision of the board that there is a list in which we would like to participate, and then we pay for those memberships because as a board we have agreed, and then we find individuals who are willing to then attend those meetings, and then we get feedback. We get information back about what is happening in those organizations as they relate to our board work or our communities. Right now, or my understanding is how this has been done has been just individual board interest when it has come up, and then if they've been added or not. Siri.
I just want to clarify something up there. The El Centro Cultural Mexicano and the Redmond 2050 Advisory, I do on my time. That is not as a school board member that I am there, nor in representation of Lake Washington.
Thank you for that clarification. So I guess we can just open it up to discussion around general ideas.
Can I offer where that came from? So in board docs right now. Okay. Great. And so that's where that came from. And so this will, that's helpful to know, and we'll make sure that that's updated.
Yes, Mark.
I agree, it has been haphazard as to where we should be and where we haven't been and where we ought to be. I think as one of my bugaboos about our communications, or our public outreach, if you will, is that often the only time we go out to our public is when we're asking them for money for a levy or a bond. And I think we ought to be a constant part of our community as much as possible, whether that's going to the PTSA meetings, whether that's being a board member or a member of the one civic group or another. I would like to see us be, if people have the time, the resource, or the time to go. I understand that there are work commitments that prohibit people from perhaps going to those meetings. There is the body clock that I have a problem with, of getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to a breakfast meeting, but I actually fight my natural body clock and go to them. These organizations provide scholarships often to our students. I know that the Rotary provides a scholarship to Eastlake. They also, in the last few years, thanks to my advocacy, now include Lake Washington Tech, which we're part of that consortium for. And I think it's a vital piece that we've now reached out to those students who want to go to a 2-year program or have a different track to their future success. I'd love to see us in Redmond, Kirkland, you name it. And I think we should be. It's, I think, helpful for them to be able to see us involved in the community beyond turning on our board meetings twice a month. And also, I think it helps our students, as well as when I'm trying to get funds for levies and bonds, I have access to leaders that I may not have known before. When I joined the Rotary up in Sammamish, half of the city council was in the Rotary.
So I think there's an interesting question here, and that is, at least for me, it's interesting, and that is, to what benefit for the school district is it for a board member to be representative at these community organizations versus a member of district staff? And I don't know the answer to that question. And I'm kind of curious to hear other people's perspectives as well. But for example, when we are in the midst of a levy or a bond campaign, I think it makes a lot of sense for staff to be attending kind of these community service organizations to inform them about, you know, why we're going out for it, what it means, how much, and all that explanation. I feel like that just makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's useful for a board member to also be present. I don't know that it's necessary per se. Yeah, I'd open it up for discussion. Yes, Mark.
When we do have levy or bond votes, the staff is limited to informational presentations. Mm-hmm. Once the staff member sits down, then the board member can stand up and advocate and recruit people to help in that effort. And if you're not a member and they don't know who you are from Adam, you're not going to get that kind of response. It's a matter of being part of the community. I think that I can see the macro and not wanting to perhaps be a part of a national organization that you don't feel you get a benefit from. But our students and our families get a benefit from these services that these organizations do. The organizations provide meals to our low-income housing places, residences, if you will, our shelters, and we're part of that. And the fact that we are known throughout the community as being a part of it, I think that it's short-sighted and it is myopic in a lot of ways with the dollar amounts we're talking here. I mean, if we're justifying a $40 a month cell phone fee, I would suggest that the same would hold true for these numbers that are in the double digits and triple digits.
So I don't think anyone's advocating to pull out. We were
I
talking
think we ought to
about
broaden.
we're talking about kind of what would be our strategy and our intent and in choosing specific organizations.
So you're looking for a
Siri.
bigger strategic concept in which you're trying to get a framework of what is our engagement with community organizations.
I think so. I think that's where we'd like to start.
So initially, I remember holding these conversations with Dr. Pierce and also with Dr. Stavum in regards to how do we look at building that community piece and doing so. And one of the things we talked about was trying to be able, we did a lot more work reaching out to the Kiwanis and Rotary, especially around our levy bond. And the conversation, as you speak for, it's of value to be there all the time, not only at those times, to be able to have those conversations. So I do think there is value in being involved. Now, whether or not that is a board responsibility to be involved is the piece that has to sort of be discussed and determined. I then think there is an accountability for the individual who is there, if they are being a representative of the board, that there is feedback to the board about what is happening within that setting. And that can be done at a meeting, it can be done in some fashion, but there should be some feedback loop if there is an investment by the board in being there, and that therefore what is the role that the school district is being benefited, what are we being benefited from by paying for that. I think that's just a responsibility around the budget to be able to pay attention to. But I do think there's a lot. I think there's value behind it. And especially after COVID, it's another piece. If they're meeting virtually, I'm not 100% it's as effective, I'll be honest. I think there needs to be some in-person contact so you can have them build those relationships in that setting. But there is nothing that stops any board member from sitting on boards and things that has no requirement from the board to say you're just not a board representative while you're there.
You want me to go now?
There seems to be a lull, yes.
Okay. So you can see, and my team has been updating the information you see here just as we pull this together in one place. And you can see that staff they participate in a lot of these organizations already. As I think about where are the places that we have a good reach into the community and where are there gaps, we have a great reach to our parents and families, and actually a lot of our former families, because we don't take them off of our mailing list unless they ask. And so that's a service to them. But we don't have a great reach into our retired communities or our communities that have never been parents here in the district. And I find every time I go to one of our Kiwanis or Rotary clubs, these are individuals that have a vested interest in the success of the youth of our community. And so they really are allies in the work, but they don't always know how to kind of leverage and connect with the school district. And so the Chamber of Commerce, to me, is a much different type of organization. It isn't, it's about serving the community in a different way, but it's not a service organization, if you will. So maybe my professional opinion or my personal opinion is that having representation, like formal representation on Kiwanis and Rotary, gives us an avenue into the community that we have a really hard time establishing and maintaining on a consistent basis. And so so I find that valuable. And so if I was looking at these to be strategic about where the board sits, I would say Kiwanis and Rotary, because their missions are, there's great crossover with what we do as a district and what they're thinking about. And a lot of times, they're already engaged with our schools. When we were at Kirkland Kiwanis, they were talking about Key Club and the number of students at Juanita High School that they were working with and engaged with. They have, Kirkland Kiwanis has a scholarship. It's a non-merit scholarship for students with disabilities. And they're seeking, like, how do we get this information out? And so they're always thinking about how do we help impact our communities. And many of them, it's about youth. And so for me, that's why I think that's of high value for us. Yes, bond and levy time, but just the ongoing nature of the relationship, it enhances the experience of our students in schools. So that's why I think if we're just talking service organization, and there's some other organizations here that play a different type of role. So that's my thoughts about Kiwanis and Rotary.
So then I would pose the question of, we've got kind of a random assignment of which ones we are currently participating in, and essentially it's the only ones that Mark sits in at this time. So then if there was an attempt to kind of have a, for lack of a better word, strategy around being involved in these, in my brain it makes sense that we assign director districts to the cities in which they live, with not a requirement. I don't think we can require anybody to participate, but with an ask or to attempt to attend. And then I think it makes sense in that capacity then for the district to pay for the membership cost, because the board member would be there as a representative of the board. Eric?
I agree with what Dr. Choi said, and I'm just reflecting on what Dr. Homer was talking about, and I think I'm just like trying to then like draw that like to like wait, what is like the not policy, but like what is the larger idea? I think like what you said about connecting with communities that the district does not otherwise regularly connect with would be like a good mission statement for the purpose of these of our additional memberships, right? And that makes sense to me. Like that is like the strategy statement, and then thinking about whether our memberships fit within that strategy statement. I would support any number of memberships that fit within there. And I do think that the Kiwanis, Rotary, and so service type organizations, we have to look at what the organization's actually doing, notwithstanding the name for each of these. But the one like Kirkland Kiwanis, like that is the work they're doing. They're highly interested in the success of our students and want to participate. And it is there are former board members that are participants on it, but it's otherwise not a organization or a group that we would regularly connect with. So that all makes sense to me. And then I've been babbling so long that I forgot what Dr. Choi just said that I agree with what. Director districts. Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. We do have sort of an imbalance now in terms of where directors live in the cities. I now am the only resident of Kirkland. So we want to think about that. I don't know. So I'm not sure director districts is necessary, but I do think that sort of geographic assignment makes sense. I'm not sure if it's necessarily director district. So I have a wonder, but I'll see. I have a wonder of whether Eastside. I don't mean to like pick on individual things now, but if that is the strategy statement, I don't know if everyone agrees to that, but if that is the strategy statement, I do think we need to think about whether what we're paying for now fits within that.
Yeah, I think that would be the next step if we get consensus around a strategy. Mark?
One of the reasons I ended up being the only person going to those two clubs is because I was the only one willing to take the time to go. The other aspect, it does make sense to try and spread it out. I mean, the people who are in Redmond, well, I'm in basically unincorporated Redmond. I'm still involved in Redmond. But to be quite frank, if someone from the Redmond area wanted to take Kiwanis on, that'd be great. Then what do we do with the Kiwanis in Sammamish? That then do I end up being a member of both? What I found is that during my last 10 years now of trying to be members of these organizations, I've tried to recruit staff members, in particular the principals at Eastlake, and a couple of them have tried. And after a couple of months, they realized they just couldn't go to a 7:30 meeting because that's when school is in session, if you will. And the same way with the 8 o'clock meetings at Kiwanis. I'm sorry? Whatever. Yeah, well, tell that to a staff member that shows up at 7:30, principal that shows up at 7:30 every morning. But I've tried to recruit them, and I'd love to have them, but.
Eric, did you have something else?
Yeah, so
That helps.
Thank you. With the idea that is the board that is members, well, assuming that's what everyone's going to agree to, that is the board is the member. The board is the member. I don't know if that's English, of the associations, and not the individual board member. So I think I agree that it's important to have the sort of the feedback loop at our at board meetings of what's going on in these. I don't know it's necessarily. It's a little nuanced. I don't know it's the responsibility of the individual board member, because we're not paying for that board member's membership. We're paying for the board's membership. All that to say is I think there should be a feedback loop in the system. I just don't think it needs to be. I don't think the policy needs to be so explicit as to say if we're not paying for Mark to be a member of Kiwanis. We're paying for the district to be a member of Kiwanis, and there should be some level of reporting back. But I don't think it's.
Well, I think we're
an
paying
imposition
for
of-
a board member to be.
Basically, it was the superintendent's membership that I ended up taking over because she couldn't attend.
But then if a board member then steps into that position and says, I will be the representative, then I think that there should be an implicit agreement to then bring information back to the board.
Yes, and I think we should. Thank you for saying that concisely. And I think we should have that as a regular item on our agendas and meetings.
I also think many of these organizations meet weekly, and I'm not sure that that's a reasonable. I'm not sure it's a reasonable ask to attend weekly, even though that's wonderful for relationship building. But figuring out the correct pattern for the board to attend these service organization meetings, again, I don't think it needs to be weekly. I couldn't do a weekly meeting at a service organization. And so that's another point of discussion.
I think we're generally in agreement that that's a good strategy to have when we're considering memberships to service organizations in our community. I haven't heard anybody object. With that in mind, I would like to look at one in particular that we're paying for, and that is the Eastside Human Services
Before
Forum.
we move on,
Yes.
could we have staff look to see what other civic clubs, civic organizations there are out there that we don't belong to, then perhaps we would bring more value? Because we did this kind of happenstance, to be quite frank. And, I know the Kiwanis are over in Kirkland. I know that they're up in Sammamish. I couldn't tell you if Rotary has I think they have a chapter in Redmond. I don't know. I don't know about Kirkland. There would also be the Lions Club was a great club down home. And I don't know how much of a presence they are here. But I think we ought to take a look and see what are out there and what are we not thinking of. I don't know. I don't know what other club. God knows I'm not going to be being a member of the Garden Club probably, but they don't like my dandelions. But seriously, if there's other groups that someone knows about, I'd be open to the idea. Whether it's official, non-official, however you want to put it. Yeah, it is a pain in the butt to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday and drive 10 miles to a meeting, but you don't get charged mileage for it.
So the other thing that I asked my team to do is what are the other community partnerships with organizations that we have? And so, we've started, and is it a formal or an informal relationship? And I'm sharing the wrong computer screen right now, so I'll just read a few of them. Like formal relationships with Youth Eastside Services, communities and schools, nourishing networks. If I could speak Spanish better, I would say this one better, but Noticias en Español, I believe is how you say that. Operation School Bell. Those are formal. Sound is a mental health service organization. Asian Counseling Referral Services and CMAR. So all of those we have formal relationships, and then we have informal partnerships with Eastside for All, Brazilian Community Services, Central Cultural Mexicano, For Tomorrow, Essentials First, Timberlake Church, and A Plateful. And so those are just, and this was from 3 days of staff providing feedback, and so we'll continue to build this out. But so it kind of to your point, staff are, where they're able to engage formally and informally, they're in that as well.
One of the organizations that didn't make your list, and I think, to be quite frank, I've tried to go and it never has fit into my schedule, and that's FIRE, the Interfaith Council, because they have such a reach.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It seems like every faith and their brother and sister,
Yep.
if you will, are members except for us. I don't know what others that are out there, to be quite frank, but
So I do think that there's an interest in kind of seeing what other opportunities there potentially are that would follow under our new strategy. But yes, moving forward to Eastside Human Services Forum. So again, I'll just speak from my own personal experience. I've been on the board for 2 years now, and I have yet to understand why we are a member for Eastside Human Services. I haven't heard, I don't believe that there's been any updates kind of around the work they're doing with the district or kind of what that partnership is. And yeah, I honestly cannot say that I actually even know what the point is for Eastside Human Services. And I'm not asking for an explanation. I'm just saying that that's a reflection of,
you haven't asked.
I think, our engagement with this organization. And then, therefore, it begs the question of, is it worth paying $3,000 a year to be a member of this organization that I personally don't have any kind of valuable feedback from or engagement with? And so my proposal initially would be to cancel our membership with Eastside Human Services Forum, and with also an understanding that Eastside Pathways seems to be doing a lot of similar work, if my understanding is correct. And we are engaged through Siri with Eastside Pathways, but also staff is embedded within Eastside Pathways pretty extensively. And so it makes sense for, I think, us to continue and move forward with that organization in lieu of Eastside Human Services Forum.
Just to give
Yes,
some
Mark.
history, I stepped into the position after Cassandra left the board. Now, I don't know if we had a member from the board preceding her or not. I assume it was you, to be quite frank. Again, we don't make the monthly reports, but we have been asked to. Unfortunately, the very first meeting I attended was made chair of the legislative committee, which I think was a mistake on their part, but that's another thing to be mattered. My wife wasn't pleased. But I think that if you look at Eastside Human Services Forum, that you'll find every school district, or virtually all the school districts that are leaders in the East Side are members. The city councils or the city governments are members. And it's a matter of having input into the social services and East Side services that are out there. Now, am I going to live and die on this sword? No. But I think it's, again, part of the, being a leader in the East Side. You end up having to be part of organizations that you may not see the direct impact on an ongoing basis. they're an educational organization, not a lobbying organization. That's a very unfortunate but a very distinct limitation that they have. They can hold forums on a given topic, but they can't go and talk to legislator X, Y, or Z on a given topic, or they don't as official representatives of it.
So I think we had that question. I think I asked you what other school districts participate in Eastside Human Services Forum, and I believe there's only 2, and we're one of them.
Well, Bellevue, Issaquah, and I want to say North Shore was. I don't know if they still are.
I believe Bellevue was pulled out, and so has North Shore. So it's just us and Issaquah at this point.
So I will say, I did serve on the board when I had come on, and so they were looking for another school district and wanted Lake Washington to be involved. At that time, Eastside Pathways was not in existence. It really is and it was a great opportunity to bring together very different systems. It brought nonprofits with city as well as school districts, hospitals, to be able to hold that conversation going forward. I think they have had a hard time finding their footing. And so I think through that process, it has been hard to see where is their influence at this point in time of being able to go forward. I know in conversation with some cities that they find the value of the human services coming together. And being that we are a big human service provider in many regards, there might be some argument there that there is presence there. It does bring your cities. I think Redmond, Bellevue, and Issaquah are still actively engaged with it. I'm not sure if Kirkland is. They were at one point. So that is good. I think one is they used to do convenings, because I remember going to their convenings that they had, and it gave opportunity to talk about various issues and sort of where the school's issues might be within those issues. But I am unaware. You do not hear their name at this point in time in the community. I have not seen workshops coming from them. So don't know enough.
I think I've only been to one workshop in the last 2 years that they had a forum of, and I think it's been in fact, they have only part-time staff that has turned over a bit. Probably is a reflection of it, but that comes from the fact that they don't have the strength in budget to have a full-time staff. But that said, if it's duplicative, so be it. Again, as you say, we do provide human services. Their support of mental health on the east side, their support of housing for homeless students, their support for special needs students is all there, and has been one of the 3 of their priorities in the 2 years I've been on. I don't know what goes back historically with Syria. I don't know.
So, honestly, I really don't have any skin in this game at this point in time. So I can give you a historical perspective and that piece. I know that Leadership Eastside and Eastside Pathways, Leadership Eastside isn't up here, but is actually another. They were trying to do collaboratives at one point as well. They're not. That's very similar to the Eastside Human Services, very similar to Eastside Pathways models. So these are all very similar collective impact models. And so the question is, where do we want to target our time in those collective impact models is what I would think about, because they're all very similar in their approaches. Eastside Pathways is most specifically aligned with what we do, because they are birth to 26, I believe, is the age group that they are working with. It is designed around schools and schools being engaged. We got engaged initially, 2017 at this point in time, 2016. They have also had some challenges and have been doing a revamp of their entire board and their programs. And so I think there is some challenges there as well in being able to think about how we engage in Eastside Pathways. Although they do align directly with what we do. So there is some value with that. We brought a huge piece that was Bellevue School District was the only ones involved at the time. Lake Washington, it took several years to get Lake Washington integrated into that, and I think we became a very clear player, especially with our data and our ability to be able to do some of that work in that setting. I don't know how that's going to play out. I mean, Eastside Pathways is one to sort of figure out where it's at. And maybe it's trying to figure out where Eastside Human Services is at to better understand what's happening there, and if that is a place that our engagement is of value. I just don't know, because I'm not sure what they're doing.
Just a point of information, East Side Human Services, and I believe it's East Side Alliance, I'm going to be fuzzy on the name of the exact name, they've merged, or they are in the process of merging. I wouldn't be surprised to find that happen with the other organizations to make, one, a bigger impact, but also to cut down administrative and competitive costs, if you will. But that said, so I don't know, if we end up being a member of only one, eventually we're going to end up being a member of all again. I would suspect. But that said, I think we have city council members who would be a little bit disappointed to see us withdraw. I know that when Cassandra left the board, all of a sudden there was a scramble from Eastside Human Services to see who could be a part of it. And I started getting repeated calls. And that's why I ended up, and I think you and I both were interested in becoming part of it. But anyway, that's my input as far as informational goes.
So Lisa or Eric, do you guys have an opinion on?
Opinion on whether we should pay for a membership? I don't think the district should be paying for a membership in the Eastside Human Services Forum.
I have no real opinion. I'm Googling both of them right now on my district issued laptop.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think, yes.
Can I comment real quick?
Yes, John.
And for me, this isn't a discussion about Eastside Human Services Forum. It's about, it's really about where do we target our energy, because we can't participate in every organization. Many organizations have wonderful missions that we could connect to our organization and our work. I can tell you right now the commitment of staff to Eastside Pathways in both leadership, time, data analysis, and data views is quite extensive. Matt Gillingham was really instrumental in providing some executive leadership for Eastside Pathways around a number of initiatives that they continue to point to as some of their hallmark successes as an organization. And so we actually are embedded pretty deeply with Eastside Pathways, whereas staff are not embedded with Eastside Human Services. And again, it has nothing to do with their mission and their work. It really is just about where we've allocated time of staff and those resources. And so while there's not a cost of quote-unquote membership, the cost really is staff time. So there's dollars being spent on Eastside Pathways. It just isn't a membership. And so if, to me, it's really about where are we going to align, yes, the board's kind of connection, but it's also about staff work and time. We probably can't do both well, and we're already embedded within Eastside Pathways. So that's just from my perspective where staff time and kind of commitment is right now.
How much staff time would you estimate on a monthly basis? And I assume that'd probably be in excess of the 3,000 annual, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, there are some of their cooperatives that are meeting on a monthly basis. There's times where staff are spending half days, particularly around data. We have a data sharing agreement with Eastside Pathways, so just that work alone, getting a data sharing agreement, is an annual process. So it's, yes, well north of $3,000 if we were to account for staff time.
Yeah, I think that our school district is probably, of the representatives that I'm familiar with and work with consistently, I'm the only one that doesn't have staff attending or filling in. I know that the county council members usually have their staff members attend. On rare occasion, they can attend. Same way with city council members from the various cities. So it's basically a matter of, if you can't have staff devote hours to both, this has been more or less a compromise, to be quite frank.
Can non-members attend Eastside Human Services Forum committees, their legislative committee?
I wouldn't think they would.
I believe you can.
Well, they can attend. What impact would they have of being able to vote? No. I'm working on helping them work on their new strategic plan. But again, if I'm not doing it and someone else doesn't want to, or we decided that $3,000, basically less than, what is that, a few $100 a month, isn't worth it? That's y'all's call. I'm just trying to say what we're doing with it and how we've been involved.
So the piece of how their board is structured, there are 2 spaces on their board that are specific to school district representatives. That's part of their structure on their board. So Issaquah is currently one of the representatives. I don't know if you have to, I'm assuming you have to be a member. You had to be a member in order to be on the board. That I knew for sure. Whether or not it is to be active in that organization, I don't know. So similar to NSBA, right? Do you have to be a member to be active with what they do, or can you be a non-member and not be active, and still be active? But yes, knowing that you're so embedded in Eastside Pathways at this point in time and that component, I think that might be the place. And then you can see how Eastside Human, arguably another school district could come in as well, because they will go recruiting, trying to find, and there probably is value in having multiple different school districts be at that executive level. I don't think you have to be at the board level to be engaged. So that'd be homework to find out.
Well, I think we've gotten everyone's perspectives. There seems to be general consensus that Eastside Pathways seems like it makes sense to continue with moving forward with them at this time. The staff commitment, the time commitment. We already have board members engaged as well, and then we also are hearing the things that Eastside Pathways are doing in our schools and with our students in our communities. So I think we're done with this topic. Yep. Okay. And then the last component, I think, of the budget. Am I lying, or is that it? Yes. The last component.
And so so as in, I believe it was 1987, the revised codes of Washington were, I believe, updated. Yeah, I don't believe it was the first time it was in the RCWs, but you can see 28A 343, wow, 400, talks about a compensation waiver for board members. And to my knowledge, this has never been a conversation that the board has formally had. And so both Leigh and I thought it was an important conversation to have. And so what the regulations allow is for board members, or that the board may authorize through a formal action at a board meeting to allow access to compensation for board work. And it is $50 per day for attendance at a meeting or other designated district activity, which we would need to define, for no more, for a total of $4,800 annually. And so as we think about compensation, this is not a, in the scope of the compensation world, this is not about, really funding a work position. This really feels more like an honorarium or a stipend for time and associated costs. And so that's what the RCW speaks to. But then it actually goes on further to talk about what's the intent of this. And so it's for them, and I'll read their words, to ensure for the sake of educational excellence that the electorate has the broadest possible field in which to choose qualified candidates for its school boards. The second thing it says is to ensure the opportunity to serve on school boards be open to all regardless of financial circumstances. And the third thing they cite is to ensure that the time-consuming and demanding service as directors not be limited to those able or willing to make substantial personal financial sacrifices. And that was codified in 1987. So school districts have to use local levy dollars to pay for this. And for a district our size, that really isn't we have, levy dollars and we have state dollars. And so, coding that correctly is not an issue. So I thought it was important for the board to have that conversation. I also did some Q&A with both attorneys and with some of our internal staff about this as well that I'm also happy to share after board conversation.
When I first joined the board, I was told there's a stipend, but no one takes it. And it'll go toward your expenses for going to the WASDA meeting, for the mileage, if you charge mileage, if you have a hotel bill that basically came out of there. I didn't know there was actually another line item for those things. And I just assumed that it was just swept over. And I understand this new, or I say new, 1987. I was still in Chicago, for God's sakes. I'm barely 30 years old. We won't say where some people were. But I understand the intent of that last section, and there had been a big conversation of that in the city council levels. A really nasty kind of brouhaha from Redmond over the compensation of city council members. So, I'd be interested in finding out what the Legal Beagles had to say, or staff.
Can you go to the next slide? So okay, conclusion. I do not support paying board members, and I disagree with the policy that the legislature codified here. I think there's, I think that I think that service in your community is important, and I think that we want school board members who are in it for service reasons, and I think that paying board members, to me, is I don't know. It cuts against this. It sort of corrupts I guess, even as a small amount. I do think it kind of corrupts the service aspect of it. And I think that's really important. And I do not think that paying board members will lead to better boards and better board members. And so I certainly would not take it. And I also don't think, as a policy for our board, that we would that we should be compensating.
Lisa or Siri, would you like to have a comment before we go back around?
Yeah, I can comment. I definitely I feel this intent. I also don't know that particular stipend is going to really make a big difference. I guess I have sort of a timing issue with it, which is that the field for this November's elections is set. So if we're trying to ensure the broadest possible field, we've already missed the boat. And so if we wanted to revisit this, coming up, or if we wanted it to take effect in 2 years or something like that, I think we could have that conversation. But it honestly makes very little sense to me to do that here in September 2023. And if it's lovely that this is the legislature's intent, I would say that there are significant obstacles to realizing this intent, and that the stipend that we're talking about is really kind of a drop in the bucket. If we wanted to decide as a board, yes, we really, we really want to get behind this intent of the legislature, and we wanted the stipends to be part of a larger effort, like this becomes one of our legislative priorities. And, I think we all know just the hoops that we have all jumped through to be sitting here. For me, they've been very recent, and so I really do feel this, but also that the lack of stipend was probably pretty low on the list of the hurdles. So if we wanted to tackle some of those other hurdles and we said, hey, we want, as a school district, we're going to kind of put some skin in the game and we're going to pay our board members to at least remove a hurdle that's in our control while we work on some of the others, that would be one thing, but just doing that. Okay, then that's yeah. Then it feels like it doesn't feel like enough.
So I will say this has been a topic that's been out there for several years, and you see it going across the board. I remember talking to PTSA, and they're saying about people requesting that there are stipends for PTSA. And the challenge with that being we're a volunteer organization. So there is a whole challenge around paying, and I don't disagree with what you said, Director LaLiberty, in regards to service and the value of that. And I will say that is definitely a cultural piece I bring from how I was raised. So at the same time, I recognize that should service cost you to do so. So that is a different piece than looking at this. So the other piece I have a challenge with compensation right now is, and I'm not clear as you are, let's say, in regards to yes or no. It's a very gray area for me at this point in time. I think if you start down the path, so I appreciate yours of how do you start to really think about the bigger issues, because some of the research I've read about compensating electeds doesn't get to this intent at all. It actually does the opposite. It embeds people longer. And so if that's the case, then what are the other barriers we need to tackle and remove more effectively to be able to get a broader diversity of and possibilities for people to come and maintain the focus on our kids? So I'm not sure that helps. But I don't disagree with the challenge of timing. If I remember correctly, because this has to be passed by a board resolution, which was stated in the first RCW, it would not go into effect until those who are newly elected into the position. Is it different? Cities are that way.
Board members are not municipal officers.
I know. Okay, so it doesn't fall that way.
Correct.
But it's still a board resolution.
Yes.
And then it would go into effect immediately.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Good to know. That was a question I didn't know.
Okay, so, sorry.
No, but so I think it's a good conversation for the board to really think about as to because if the goal is to have a well-represented board that is engaged, what does that mean? And what's the financial mean that's required to it? Up to this point, I think we've had engaged board members, and that financial piece hasn't been there. But that doesn't mean there are people out there who would be engaged if that wasn't as much of a barrier. But when you do this in the midst of a budget decrease, I think that piece is what makes it harder.
So before I give you another turn, Mark,
Please go.
I guess my viewpoint, and I think I've spoken about this before, is one, I think it's a misnomer to call this compensation for the board, because in nobody's definition of compensation is $50 per board day event enough money to cover any of our expenses when we are here. I'm just reflecting to when I have a board meeting, we have a study session, we have a board meeting, it's a minimum of 4 to 5 hours of time that I'm away from my family, and paying for a babysitter in this day and age, $50 does not even cover one board meeting for babysitter costs. So I really object to the term compensation when talking about this. I appreciate the intent of this RCW in that I agree with that last statement of directors not be limited to those able or willing to make substantial personal and financial sacrifices. We already have chosen, because we chose to run for office. Nobody forced us to do this when we knew what we were getting into when we ran. So I think personal sacrifice is expected and anticipated. I think that there is a problem when we are telling people that they have to financially then pay to participate in democracy, which is what we are doing. And although I agree that this is not even close to enough money to get rid of that burden or to not have that be a limitation for running for office, I do think that it's at least a step in the right direction. I mean, I try to think, what is $50 in 1987 equivalent to now? And that's a different conversation. But that's where I'm coming from. Is I'm in a place of privilege that I can afford babysitters and family coming to help with my personal situation so that I can participate in our democracy and in our district. And if those were not things that I could afford, I could not have run to be on the school board. So, Mark.
In the last 10 years, I only know of 2 candidates, and I'm sure there's others that just never popped up publicly, that actually asked, well, how much do I get paid? And I recall a former board member, when she was asked, because she was retiring, nearly had a stroke, that the person even brought it up. And it came up, I think, recently this last election, too. I agree with you. It's not really compensation. It is covering of expenses, to be quite frank. And that, again, that as now, for us to go on the road to a meeting, no, we don't get a per diem per se, but they cover our expenses to go there. They cover our meals, whatever, the cost of the program. Again, I agree, that's not compensation. $50 a day probably was pretty damn cheap even in '87. I remember, to be quite frank, I was so thrilled when all of a sudden in 1986 I was making $30,000 a year. Thank you very much. I was just hats and horns. I see the intent, and I really appreciate the fact that I'll lay you odds out of income levels. I'm probably the least of anyone in this room. And I've survived it. And basically because I had a spouse that wanted to make sure that I was able to be involved. We flipped a coin to see who was going to run, and basically I lost. No, seriously. I think it's the idea that it's a great intent, and if the compensation were a level that would make a difference in gaining more access to a broader array of candidates, I think would matter. If we were talking thousands of dollars per month, it would make a difference. $50 a day? I don't think so. The other thing is, I had a very long conversation about this with a member of one of the LDs, because he was pushing legislation. I think he ended up on the compensation committee for Redmond. And I said, I would have a hard time pressed asking to be compensated when I know that there are staff members who are still living in public housing, who are on food stamps, and my stipend or my pay could actually go to pay for those services that would directly have an impact on students. And I said, I would not accept it for that reason, because I feel that someone who's in a classroom every day deserves a hell of a lot more than I do for going to a meeting a couple times a month and whatever time it takes me to read and do whatever else I do for the organization. I agree with compensation, no. Reimbursement, that's probably a different kettle of fish.
I want to clean up something I said earlier, because I was imprecise and inarticulate. I agree with the goals of what is listed in the intent there. I really support it. What I don't agree with is that compensating board members accomplishes those goals. And I appreciate Director Guthrie being much more eloquent than I was in talking about that there are other structural issues in place that limit those who are able to participate. And I think we as a board need to be mindful of that. And in part when we set our work plan and decide how we're going to operate and what that, and what is required of being a board member, that while it may work for the 5 people here, that when we set that, that may mean that somebody else who's watching the work that the 5 people here are doing, that means they just don't have the bandwidth to do that. So I just think we need to be thoughtful about that. And so I don't know if this is now a little bit going off topic, but I was looking back at our policies on board member qualifications and elections, and we've now embedded in there that we do more work on candidate orientation. So this is not for today because this is not on the agenda, but I do think having maybe a larger conversation about thinking about how we as a board can have policies in place for advertising for openings, encouraging people to run, thinking about the limitations on those that would otherwise want to serve and be able to serve but can't because. So I just think I don't know the answer to that today, but I think having a working group or something on the sort of larger systemic issues would be helpful. I just don't think that compensation, in particular $4,800, is going to accomplish that.
Sure, I have three pieces. My opinion is that the board should authorize compensation under these conditions, being that any board member can access that or not access it. And that's an individual person's decision as opposed to it's one decision for an entire board. I think of the work that all of you do, and while yes, there is honor in doing it strictly on a volunteer basis, but there are also true and real costs associated with boardsmanship. Just driving here, the cost of gasoline and plugging your electric car, whatever it is, there are true and real costs that come alongside of this, and I completely agree that the term compensation is almost offensive in this framework because it really is more of honorarium, which is just simply recognition of a set of hours and time. Because you think about going down to University of Washington for graduation. You're paying for gas. You're probably paying to drive the 520 bridge both ways. I mean, by the time you get home, you have spent north of $50 just to get to and from the event. So for me, I think having the availability of this for board members is a good thing. I do not think it incentivizes anyone to participate in this work, but I think it honors at a very minimal level that there are real costs associated with this work. I called Pablo Ortega yesterday to say, hey, this was the intent. And we had that conversation around structural conditions that don't allow people to participate. And his comment, it was almost like you had the conversation with him. He said it, but he had a different outcome. He said, this is not the thing that will cause your board to diversify, but it could be one of the things that allows someone to think about it. He says there's a ton of other work you need to do to diversify your board, to have a community that really does see it as viable, but not doing this could be a barrier. an unintended barrier, even if the board doesn't access it for years. But at least having it available could be one of those structural barriers that's at a minimum reduced, because $4,800 isn't going to be the thing that someone does this for. And so that's kind of where we landed with it. And I talked to legal counsel about this, because there's some districts that have interpreted these positions as municipal officers, which is what you were asking about. There are school boards that have passed resolutions that said future board members can only have access to this, or board members after the next term. And that is, from my reading of it and our attorney's reading of it, a misinterpretation of the Constitution and the municipal laws around this. And so that's my opinion of this. I think making it available, and you as board members may at times decide not to access portions of it, and there may be times you do decide to access portions of it. Just our meetings alone do not total $4,800. So if you're only participating in board meetings and not doing school visits or graduate, there's no way you could even reach that $4,800 limit, because the $50 threshold, it's a pretty low threshold. So that's my opinion. And I don't have research or anything to back that. It's just how I feel. I have always felt that way. When we bring people in who say they're volunteering to speak to groups, we provide them with an honorarium. When we, you think in our personal lives, you have a service for someone who passed, you provide honorariums for people playing music, and so it's, to me, it just honors people's time, but it's not what incentivizes them to do the work. Now, if we were talking about compensation such as the City of Redmond just did, that's a different type of compensation. I think probably that the research is really speaking to. And I think the other piece for me is, yes, we are in a situation where we're having to think about our budget. Like, that is a real thing. And anytime we've talked about any other group, it has been about making sure that that group is honored through that process. And so I have a hard time saying, well, the board shouldn't do this because of, XYZ group. I think we have done a great job over the last couple of years with our work with all of our labor groups, represented or non-represented. And so for me, that feels disconnected from how we have thought about these types of things for other groups.
Yeah, I do want to comment that, I have a comment and question. I do want to comment that $4,800, I think we're in this room are saying that this is not a lot of money, but for some of our community members, that is actually a very substantial amount of money. And so I want to recognize my own privilege in feeling like that would not make a huge difference for me personally, but recognizing that in and of itself is a privilege. Also a question about turning it down, or sort of it's available to the board, you can choose to access it or not. Would that be public information? So would a community member be able to figure out that Leah was not accessing compensation and I was, for example?
I would assume yes, because it would be public funds that are being paid to someone. We would have to pay taxes on that. That's why the number on the budget was $27,000 and not a lower amount. So yes, I believe so. But just like all other employees, it wouldn't be like a pay warrant would be on the board's packet. It would be done similar to how we do all other compensation for employees.
Does anybody else have any other comments?
I appreciate the discussion. No, I think it's been good.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable to talk about because it's our positions, but I think it was necessary, especially because John says he could not recall if it had ever occurred.
No, we had it at the extended retreat, but it got cut off the agenda because we went over time.
Yes, yes.
And so I would just ask maybe President Choi if you have individual conversations, and then if you would just let me know if the board would like a resolution to be brought forward at a board meeting. I've started drafting one, and if the board does want that brought forward, I would work with legal counsel to make sure it's accurate and appropriate. Part of that resolution would also define very specifically what are the activities that we are defining as available for compensation. And it's very typical things. It's board meetings, other meetings that comply with OPMA or are outside of the OPMA, such as closed sessions, formal school visits, graduations, and I think there was one other thing that I could,
Committee.
but just being really specific about that so that there's no questions. And so you let me know if a resolution should be brought forward.
And this refers to compensation, not reimbursement.
So reimbursement for expenses, so you know, attending a conference, travel, you know, yes, this is outside of that.
And I will say I did the math, and to get 4,800 to reach that cap, 96 meetings in a year, which I do think that most of us fall under significantly.
Okay, I'm going to say one more comment. From my now three years and 3 months on the job, the role of the board president is distinctly different than other positions, just because of the amount of time that you're engaged with me around planning and questions and things like that. So I'll just say that piece as well.
I appreciate that. And Siri and Aaron,
Well,
and
Siri,
everybody
yeah, I
else,
mean, it's-
anybody else who's been president would appreciate that, I think.
But it's really fun.
All right, let's move on. We've got 1 hour left. We can power through. This is not the last topic, is it? The next topic is going to be our board committees. These are district committees. I'll let John take over. Go ahead, John.
And so I don't think you've seen this grid before. And so part of the board's policy is that the board president will, I think, work with the board, but then ultimately assign committee positions. And this was a new effort. I believe Siri led this around adding the board president working with the superintendent around assignments to operational committees. Yes. And so we know that when our board members are there listening to the conversations, that it is really, really helpful to help then inform the full board. It provides a different lens into the work and things like that. And so we have quite a bit of work going on this year. And so, Leigh, I know you spoke with each board member, and Leigh and I felt like this represented those conversations well. We also know that with a new board member coming on, that they would step into series positions,
Committee assignment.
series committees that are here. And so we have 3 specific strategic plan committees, with Siri participating in the student success committee, the staff success committee, and then Mark participating on the organizational success committee, and then the inclusion advisory committee. One of the differences between the strategic plan committees and the inclusion advisory is a standing committee. And so that's not a committee that will sunset, where the strategic plan committees will. You can see Eric on both the budget and facility advisory standing committees, and so that's a life commitment. Leia participating on our highly capable Quest evaluation process, which is probably a 2, maybe 3-year commitment, and then our high school day evaluation, which is set to be a 2-year set of work, and then Lisa participating on our elementary literacy adoption committee, and we could articulate why specifically elementary literacy. It's foundational in so many different ways, but that's really a 2-year body of work, because year 1 really is about learning and research and things like that. And then also our community resource officer connectors group. Lisa said that would be a high interest for her, and so that'll launch as well. So that's the decision that we made. So I don't know if there's any additional conversation around assignments or questions.
No, I hopefully none of this is a surprise to anybody. I had conversations, I think, with everybody individually about interests and kind of engagement level, and so hopefully at least one of your interests was ticked in your choices, and if the other one is not, I apologize, but there's only so many board members and so many spots. So, Mark, did you have a comment?
I'm so glad you didn't put me on a technology committee. I think the district will benefit from that as well. Second, one of the things that has been a constant complaint, I think, or an input, whatever you want to phrase it, from our public, our parents, is our communications. And it seems to me that we would be remiss if we didn't have a communications committee looking at the efficacy and how to better our communications with our community. I could be wrong. And maybe this comes under community, wherever, one of the other committees. I don't know. But it's the idea that I think that's one of the issues that we have, I think, with parents, that we might not really think about a communications committee.
Any other comments?
Is there another slide?
Yes.
I'll hold.
Okay.
About the committees?
Yes. Well, not specifically about the committees, but about the board's role on the committees and then expectations.
Go.
Okay. So we have a board policy, GCO5, on board committees, and this is a proposal.
So this is a proposal to update and modify GC5, and it really is to define what are the expectations and disposition that a board member has sitting on an operational committee, because that's very different than a board member sitting on a board committee. Board committee really is driven by the board members, where this really is about, it's almost like a linkage in a way, because it's about gathering information and understanding. And so participating, number one, they're attending as an observer, not a participant. So the board's voice isn't active in the conversation. Board members are not voting members of a task force or committee. They're not actively providing options for consideration. And those are things that I have to think about as well. I mean, I can tell you, anytime I walk into a room and offer an option, that it almost is always the adopted option. And so, like, really brainstorming, problem solving, being creative, our voices limit that. And that it's weird, because it's always like, well, I'm just a person. I just want to, participate in the discussion. And it always leads to less discussion than more rich discussion. Number 4, it's kind of, I know Mark has asked about this before, and we've talked about it, but it's that establishment of how does the committee understand the board member's role in it. And so knowing that I will be working with my team around this as well, but really just taking the lead of the facilitator of that task force or committee for setting that parameter for the whole committee. And if it doesn't happen or it's not as clear, then you would just speak with the lead to make sure that it's revisited. board members take notes. Sometimes notes are provided post, and so it's more about just maintaining your understanding and keeping that information so that you then can come and provide an update to the full board, because it isn't just about you individually understanding the facilities work. It's really about coming back to inform the full board, because that's the true benefit that the full board gets by having one member participate. 6, board members shall understand the connections of the board policy to help frame updates as relevant to establish operational expectations. And so what does that mean? Maybe is probably what Eric would ask me. The idea that coherent governance board is sitting on operational committees really is to help inform your understanding of the execution of your operational policies. Like that at the end of the day, and so it should help inform the understanding of the OEs, but also as we're monitoring, it should provide some key insights into, evidence, conversations, or implementation of that. So, recommendation is to add this to the end of GC5 after 5.7, which is the language around board participants on operational committees.
This is great. Thank you. One idea. So I think it's 5 is. Okay, never mind. Sorry, I didn't read it right. So there is a fee. So 5 is take notes and share information. Regularly update the full board on. Okay, that I will interpret it that way, and that would occur at a board meeting. Is that the idea? We may want to make that explicit and provide, regular updates that public, because I do think it's important for it to be at the full board public meeting as well too. Can I keep going with one other thing? The assignments. John joked that mine was a lifetime appointment, but in all seriousness, how long are the appointments? No, and I do this like,
Yeah.
and then like, okay, so we have a new president next year, or who knows whenever we depose president. So I'll repeat what I said. Did any of that get picked up? No. Okay. We have a new president. That president has authority to make committee assignments. What then? I do think it would be helpful to have some statement about how long or how regularly these are reviewed, the assignments, just for clarity as to participation.
I have an opinion on it,
Great.
and that is it has to be reviewed annually because the terms of all the committees are different.
Yeah.
There's standing committees, there's 2-year committees, there's 1-year committees, and therefore I think it'll probably be the job of the president to relook at committee assignments every year.
That sounds reasonable to me. I think embedding that in a policy would be a good idea.
Probably under the roles and responsibilities of the president. To reevaluate committee assignments.
We could either put it under the president's role or in 5.7. The president will be responsible to appoint the board members annually.
Annually. Awesome. Mark.
If we go back to the other slide. Thank you. One, I assume that these committees, which we haven't been attending, or most of us haven't attended yet, have someone taking notes already, correct? So basically, them providing the notes to us to then inform the board probably would be the most efficient. God knows my note-taking probably is different from most people's, at least the legibility is.
not active in providing options, does that include not commenting, just staying there like a lump on a log? It seems if that's the case, then you're talking about neutering any impact or any participation the board really has in this process. And I find that offensive. I think that our input from an outside perspective is needed. I think that to have it staff only, and hell, I could listen to a recording of it for that matter then, and not be there. I find that if you have, and this goes back to organizations I've belonged to in the past, where you had board members or you had staff and board, and as a staffer, you want the board to be able to bring in an outside perspective as opposed to have a very insular staff. You don't want an ivory tower. You want to have board members who are perhaps more engaged to a degree in the community and in feedback to be able to give some input. The unfortunate situation of us having such a high real estate values, I doubt very seriously a lot of our staff really are still residents within the community. Now, those longer-term staffers who have been here for 20 years, they were able to get better prices. But I think not to have any input in the conversation makes our participation meaningless.
Yeah. Remember, these are the board's rules that they're setting up for themselves.
I know that,
and so
I agree.
that really is a discussion
But that's my
for the
point.
board. Yeah.
That's my point. I think that I could just as easily ask for the notes from the meeting and go from there, or we could have the staff, as they often make presentations on various things, report to the board. Then the board has no need to be there if we're not having any input.
So appreciate your giving the policy update and bringing sort of the possibilities forward. I guess in my experience of having been able to be a board member who was involved specifically with the strategic planning process, I think when it was done with Dr. Stavum, the goal was that we didn't talk while we were there, that really we listened to what was happening and allowed for those community members, because they are community members. I'm assuming the majority of these committees are made up of a wide range of individuals. So as a board member, I had an opportunity to just hear from a wide range of people and hear their view and not color it with my statements in any way and allow that to occur and allow that process to be. I then was able to use that information as I started to look at different things. So even when people take notes, it's very different to read the notes than it is to be in the room and hear what's happening at the same time. Because you don't get the context, you don't get the body language, you don't get how was that room playing, how the facilitation, all those things. So I have found it highly valuable to have very clear defined that I'm not there to talk. I'm not there to present my view because my opportunity comes at a different time. Because I was on the board and it would come to me and then I still have opportunity to give my opinion. This is my opportunity to learn, and that's what I value about this piece, is it really is providing opportunity to learn what's going on, one-on-one, that's not quite as in-depth in being able to do so because they don't capture all the discussion that happens there. You hear more discussion. So I appreciate that piece in putting it forward. I have been on committees in many locations where there have been electeds also on those committees, and I have watched them overtake those committees because people defer. So I guess my experience has been I would prefer that we do take very much a hands-off approach in this regards because these are operational. These are not our board committees. And our turn comes at a later date.
It might also be beneficial to know as we, and I don't know if you've had a chance to see the communication we sent out to, community and families. We actually mapped out for each of these work groups what is the representation going to be? And it's different on each work group for different reasons. And so if I just take like our budget advisory, 8 parents, 2 individuals that would identify at, like in the senior citizen community, 3 from business and industry, 4 kind of community at large, knowing that that could come from a number of our groups, maybe some of our groups that our equity and family engagement are participating with, 4 seats for our unions to participate, so our 4 largest unions, PTA, 2 students participating on the budget advisory, 2 certificated staff, 2 classified staff, 2 district leadership team members, for a total of 30 people on the budget advisory. So you think about, the scope, like if we're able to actually have all of that representation, it should be well represented. And that is true across the board for all of these with, obvious differences. Accelerated programs, we don't have folks from the senior community. We have 10 parents as opposed to, so. Anyways, I wanted to provide that as well, that it isn't solely staff, and actually it's highly community focused. So folks external from the organization.
Yeah. So I've been on a committee both as a community participant and a board member for facilities work, and I'm just reflecting on that now. When I was a community member, I actually remember remarking and having conversations with other members of the committee that it's odd that there are no board members here listening. It felt odd. And so I do think it's important, even if we... I was thinking, I do remember you being there listening. I just didn't want to give you any kudos for that. Siri attended every once in a while. There is value in having a board member there. It makes the committee feel like the work that they're doing is being listened to at the time and will be listened to. And then I think there's value as a board member. I then also attended the last update on the facilities advisory group. And there was value as a board member to be able to hear those conversations, see the process taking place. I think the key part that we, and I in particular, didn't follow through on, which is what I'm glad we have this in the policy now, is then feeding that back into this for the rest of the board and having regular updates for that and sharing that learning. Because I found it as a board member, just sitting, observing, listening, it's impossible to be completely quiet. People will ask you questions, but just being more of an answering informational questions, talking about the work of the board, that provided value for me, and I think for the committee as well. And I think closing that loop would be really helpful.
And I would also offer that by answering that informational question and then helping to frame a new question, because anytime I'm in one of these committees, I walk away with a better understanding of the situation or the content that's being discussed, regardless of what it is. And so getting those that are participating to talk more, to answer more deeply, can truly help you as board members. And then it isn't that awkward silence, because then we all play our different role in each of these things. The board's influence over any one of these committees is quite significant because you actually set policies around this. And so those policies drive and direct what these committees are ultimately identifying as outcomes. And so for me, that's really the board's role is, you've done the work around your results. Like those are very explicit in terms of what we should be targeting. And then these other pieces, budget and facilities, like those are pieces that the board has a time where you have direct influence into those things. And so allowing the committees to really do their work is important.
Lisa? Oh, sorry.
I'm going to actually table my other
Lisa.
Obviously, I haven't participated in any of this as a board member yet, but I have participated in different committees as a parent. And the makeup of different committees is very different, or different discussions. And I will say the majority of the time as a parent, I have been like the only parent in the room or in a significant minority. And so I suspect I have not looked through all of the breakdown for all of these particular committees, but I would guess that that's going to be the case, is that there's a different mix. And so there may be a different role for the board, thinking about the connection to our owners. If there's a lot of owners, in this case, parents in the room, then that might be a different, we may need to play a different role. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe some of it is just adding language around, and maybe number 0.4 might cover some of this, but just it may need to be in, like, we should have some broad, it feels like we should have some broad guidelines for when we engage, but the specifics may be a little bit different, and maybe it should just be a conversation between the board member who's assigned and whoever the committee lead is. Because I'm struggling a little bit with that too. So some of this may again just be not having played that role yet, and seeing how that plays out. Definitely appreciate that it does change the conversation, and being very aware of that is important. But also if there's a voice that we know as a board member is not being represented in that room, how do we handle that, or how does that play out?
So I think it's the way that I think about it, is that it's almost like you're being invited into somebody else's space, and you're being invited to listen, not to participate, not to engage, not to correct, not to inform. It's literally just to listen and learn. And the minute you say a word, even honestly, even if it's to provide information, the minute you say something, everybody looks at you. The amount of deference, even though you don't want it, the dynamics shift. And I don't think, these committees are not our committees. These are the district's committees. They're not board committees. It's not an opportunity for the board to give our opinion or to guide the discussion or to lead them to a different conclusion. It is literally to hear where they're coming from, what they're thinking. If there's misinformation or if there's something going on that is contrary to what your understanding is, it's insight into where we're lacking potentially in our communication efforts. It's all information. And so I think being very prescriptive and saying you do not engage is actually crucial to our collective understanding of our behavior on these committees. That's my personal perspective. Mark.
John, you mentioned the idea of bringing up a question, especially if there's an awkward silence. My concern is, by asking a question, you in some ways, sometimes, one, you're either asking for clarification because it's needed for yourself to understand where they're coming from, but also just by asking the question for clarification can have an impact on the conversation. So if you're not even asking the question, if we're not supposed to ask questions, that's fine, let it go. But if I'm unclear, maybe someone else who isn't as unclear as I am, but just is not willing to even approach the question. Maybe there's someone who's never been on a committee before or whatever, and they just don't feel comfortable. I don't know, and that's why I'm asking, especially about questions in particular.
I think another avenue would be to work with the
Chair?
Because that's another avenue for them to understand what the experience could be of the overall group.
So we just give a puzzled look in our face, basically.
So I would just say the one thing I think about is important as a board member to respect the facilitator and the staff who is running it, and to not undermine that through conversation. I mean, that's another component. They're skilled. I'm trying to think, if something were to come up and I had a concern about something, it would probably be something I would address offline, either going to Johnny's desk, hey, heads up, here's something that happened, you might want to check into that. As opposed to bringing it up there in that meeting because of the shift that you make of, well, who's in charge? Who's running this? What's the respect? So it's ensure the right role of where we are. That's their space. I like the way you put that. You're invited into a space. I think that's important to think about. So I do think you're right. It's how do you work that sort of thing. But I think we have opportunity offline potentially to do that as well.
So I think this is a good segue into our last item on our agenda, and that is our attempt to, I actually went straight to under consideration, John.
So you don't want to talk about policy?
I think we can
Okay.
kind of skip that. This is kind of my attempt to try to incorporate some of what we've discussed into our regularly scheduled board meetings. So you'll see that we've attempted to kind of categorize the areas in which board comments and updates can be presented at our meetings so that we have space built in and then expectations are clear. So our update on public and community affairs is the same, where this is kind of where we would have, with our new discussion around service organizations and board members sitting and participating in those organizations, other associations, our legislative updates from our LegRep. All of those would fall under this category in our agenda item. And then we would post the directors that are associated to whatever organization. So then there could be an expectation or an anticipation of an update related to that in this section. Questions, comments, concerns? Yes.
Great. And coordination means with city to be updated.
Yes, I agree.
We have one. Okay.
I don't have that. Mark?
I would say that not having an open comment is offensive. I find it a violation of freedom of speech. And I think that if we have a comment, if there was an issue that came up and we feel that there's a comment that needs to be made, we should be able to make it. To be so controlling as to know that every minute it's going to be precisely on what you want it to be, it's fine. But I also think that being able to comment from what we've heard in the evening is essential.
So I take offense to you calling me controlling. I don't appreciate that comment.
Well, sorry. I apologize for your offense. I think it is. I think that we need to be able to have board comment.
We do have board comment, if you'd let us continue with the presentation.
I didn't see it up there.
So the next section of the agenda would be school visits. So anything that would fall within this category would be anything that's school related that a board member attended or participated in and that they would like to inform the rest of the board. As we work for a school district, it makes sense that our comments should be centered around students and our schools for a certain extent of our public comments or our comments during our school board. So we are already scheduled to have our school visits, as you can see on our annual calendar. So there should be regular updates in this section for board members who are attending our schools. And then we've opened it up to other school-related events. So if a board member were to attend, say, a choir performance or a theater performance, and they would like to, recognize those students and the job that those schools did, this would be the place where they could do that. Any questions or concerns?
I just have a question. For the formal school visits, we had talked about having a written summary be done. Is that still in the plan? Not by a board member, however, having a staff member who goes to the school visit and is able to write up a summary of that.
Yes, that will be the support for this agenda item as well.
That'll be perfect.
That would be included in the board packet then? Is that
Yes.
data?
Yes.
And I'll say, for, as part of the challenge I had, I think I did it for my first 2 school visits, and then to be able to keep that up, you start to just lose the capacity to do so. So being able to have staff dedicated to sort of put that summary together, I think will be helpful as we're able to then keep history for people as they come on, and people who can't make it.
I
Again,
read
that
one
feedback.
of your
Oh, did
updates.
you?
It was super helpful. Yes. Right, yeah. Thumbs up to that. Yeah. So but appreciate the work, and we don't get paid $50 a day yet.
Yes, Mark.
I'm trying to recall back a few meetings, and when we had the presentation on ENAP and we honored merit, I commented at the end. That wasn't a formal school visit, it wasn't a school event, it wasn't a school performance. We've also had students participate in outside school organizations, whether it's local theater groups, local sports associations, and those students have excelled and gone to nationals. And because they aren't school teams, that wouldn't fall under this category. We had students go to be all-stars nationally in a cricket competition. I congratulated them. This wouldn't fall under that. I think we are trying to prescribe a narrow focus, and I don't think it's appropriate.
Technically, those could follow under community affairs.
I see.
And the last section for board comments would be labeled as committee updates. As we are all assigned to 2 committees this year that will be meeting regularly, and the expectation in our policy is for the board to report back, the board member to report back to the rest of the board updates. It makes sense to have a built-in area in our agenda in which we would provide those updates. I think that there's also value in potentially discussing whether or not written updates would be appropriate, because sitting through all of these updates would be a really long section of our agenda item. So potentially we could discuss, I think, maybe doing a written update, and then maybe if there is something in particular a board member felt the need to share verbally during a board meeting update, we could speak to it here. But questions or comments?
Yes, this is a good idea. And yes, I also share concerns about this turning into another meeting within a meeting.
So would
The
looking-
problem is you give a board member, sorry, Siri. You give a board member, I'm making my own point here. So you give a board member a microphone, they're going to start talking. You give the board member an agenda item with their name on it and a microphone. So yes, I share an interest in trying to think of a way of having written updates provided in the board packet.
I'm wondering if that could be like a quarterly thing as opposed to a monthly thing.
Or
Or
it
a
need not
time
be-
limit. 1 minute per committee.
I don't remember the schedule, but majority of the committees are not monthly, right? All,
I think most
are
are monthly.
is that right? They are, okay. Well, I don't have a answer, but I have an interest, which is to not have all of us giving 10-minute presentations. Okay.
I would agree with that analysis on his part. And so thinking of how you streamline that component would be valuable.
I would also offer there's some committees that probably would serve to have community updates more consistently. As I look at those, I think about those that maybe we will have greater interest in. Not interest, but that potentially there are communities that may feel more impacted by. Community resource officer, community connectors. Like it just feels like that's a good one to, on an ongoing basis, provide an update around. I think of our budget work, just providing an ongoing update around budget advisory, our inclusion work. Whereas strategic plan, the community will be very well aware of that work because we'll centrally be communicating that very consistently. Where we'll communicate the budget and facility and inclusion piece, but putting voice to it might be different for public consumption. Elementary literacy adoption, like there probably isn't going to be much of an update for a while. So I think it could play out also where there aren't substantive updates for all of these every meeting, and there's some that we probably should provide an update, anytime there is one.
So I think the goal with trying to structure our comment sections was to try to find a place where any comments that are relevant to the work of a school board member would have its place at its dedicated time. And so this is our initial attempt at trying to structure our comments section so that it is relevant to the work that we are doing and to the school district. I think moving forward, we can always revisit, change, adapt. I know one area that is missing in here is our student rep comments. And the feedback that we have gotten from them at this point, thus far in our juncture, is that they don't want their own section for student rep comments. And so I think it's okay for us to remove that at this point. And then I appreciate any feedback. If there is any topic or if there is a concern around a comment that you wanted to make, but it does not fall in these categories, open to discussions and around finding places, the right places for those things to happen. I think the one concern that I had when I was creating kind of these categories or thinking about these different categories was a lot of times during board comments is an opportunity for the board to respond to some public comments that were made during the board meeting. And that is one section I think that is potentially missing, is we don't really have an opportunity to respond to public comment. I would also posit that it potentially is also not the right time for us to be responding to public comment when we don't have all the information, or if it is not an operation, if it is an operational, which it usually is, decision for the district. So I'm already thinking about that and trying to kind of figure out how we address that. I will say that I had a conversation with Dr. Holman about how we respond to public comments in general and about creating a process or a protocol for district to respond to public comment. I don't know if you want to speak to it at all, but there are conversations happening about trying to figure out a process that works for community members as well as the district as well as the board. Any questions, comments, concerns? Eric.
The other thing to think about is often there are items that come up at a board meeting, usually through public comment, but sometimes just in a general discussion where there's a board request for follow-up from the superintendent that's often made during board member comment. I wonder whether that's the best way to do it. I mean, I don't. So that's the other sort of component that I think about when I reflect on my own use of board member comment. Often it's just sort of undisciplined rambling. But the times where I think has been useful is ask, at the time before it leaves my mind, asking for follow-up on something. And I don't, so I don't, again, I don't, that's an interest. I don't really have a solution to it right now.
Yeah, and I'll throw something else out that I don't have a solution to either, but just as a very recent community member who sometimes gave public comment, it could be very challenging to not know, knowing that sometimes things were discussed in board member comments, but not necessarily that related to whatever I or somebody who I was following was giving public comment on, but not wanting to sit through a whole board meeting as a community member. I love it now, just to be clear. It's all relevant now, right? It was not relevant before. But yeah, sometimes I wouldn't want to, have my whole Monday night taken up with that, so I decided to run. Anyway, let me get back on topic here. Yeah, because it was unpredictable, right? And so I didn't know if something, sometimes something would come up at the end, or I would be talking with other community members who were like, oh, I heard XYZ during the presentation on A. I'm like, oh, did you hear, this director's comment at the end that was related to that? And so having a predictable place to respond, ideally one that community members maybe could jump to in the video afterwards, or just deciding that's just not something that we're going to do would be helpful. But it also, I saw times when during a board meeting, somebody would bring something up in public comment, and then it really would come up in the board meeting, and that was very, very powerful as well. So I'm struggling. Again, I don't have a solution, just wanted to provide that perspective.
So I think that the piece of how you build, where does that response to what happens during the board meeting? Because you're right, we've used it at different times at the very end during board comments. Sometimes I think very usefully and sometimes not so much. But I do think, now I just lost my train of thought, just went. It has to do with, so what is that process? I think the value of when it came up during board comment is then the superintendent has the whole board saying, yes, this is important or not. And the problem is it says mine going up to him after the fact, hey, So what is that process for something, one, to end up on an agenda item that might potentially be work for staff to do? So that's the piece that sort of misses. And that would be my next question is, as a board member, if there was an agenda item I wanted to have come on, what's the process to make that happen? Right, if there was a concern of some time going. And I'm not sure that's clear. I think I utilize board comment as a place to be able to do that. So I'm not sure. Again, I don't have an answer, but I do think, and we tried to structure public comment, and it didn't work for us in the responding to public comment. We were not consistent, so.
I don't have a final answer for you, but I am talking with Cabinet about it on Monday, because I think there's, since we have staff in the room, that we can have some in the moment follow-up, because everybody submits their email address, so we have the ability to follow up with them. And so, but I want to talk with Cabinet about that, and then I'll loop back from an operational side so that we consistently have follow-up. There's going to have to be some decisions made by staff as to what is that follow-up, because there are times people bring public comment and it's actionable and it's something we're going to do something about, and at times it's something that it's an opinion or a thought that somebody has that we're actually not going to do, take action on for a variety of reasons. So I want to talk with them about how do we do that consistently and well, so that there is at least follow-up and the board knows that there's follow-up being taken on the operational piece. Leigh and I actually talked about this. There's also value in the board being able to say publicly, and superintendent, we'd like follow-up. Like just that indication that the board would like additional information, there's benefit in that. And so we didn't land on the right place for that as well. So we had the same conversation.
We did potentially talk about adding it to
Yes.
the third closing item, which is a review of the board meeting schedule. Perhaps that is a place where board members could request for a future study session or an agenda item, because that has to do with a future board meeting. And then we could potentially get consensus, like, yes, we would like a study session, or we'd like follow-up on this topic at a future board meeting. So we did discuss that as potentially a place for that. Yes, Mark?
John, to your point about having the staff respond only by email, my concern is that if one person mentions it, there may be, he or she may be actually voicing the concerns of a lot of folks. Or they may not have thought about it until they actually heard the person present. And only having an email response to that individual might ignore those that had the same concern. I'm not saying we have to do a major presentation on it, but if there's a way to, and not necessarily the same meeting, because maybe it's something that requires thought and looking into, to say, wow, it's a great idea, but there's really nothing we can do about it. So I'd really like to see us, I like the idea of having an email to them, because they will feel then responded to. But I think the overall community would like to hear perhaps our response to that issue, if it's we see that it's not just an individual's issue. Yeah. That I wanted my bus stop. That can have an impact on dozens of families. It can have an impact on one family.
Is that what you're thinking about, that third agenda item would be that opportunity to determine what any follow-up would be?
I think it's probably the space that a board member could speak if there was something that they would like to change. Because right now it's literally just saying the next board meeting date and time. I don't see why we couldn't have motions there potentially to amend a future agenda or request a study session or more information. Yeah, what's your hesitation? Yes.
Well, okay, so I'm not clear on, I guess I'm just not clear on the definition of it. If it's to set a future agenda items or to request amendments to agendas, yes, that makes sense. But it sounded like what we were sort of all maybe circling was something even a little more broad, which was that it would also be an opportunity for board members to, I don't know what, ask for follow-up on operational issues too. I just wonder if that's, to me that's not, I don't know if that's the right place. I think it also kind of merges two concepts together of like board work and operational into one agenda item, and I worry that will lead, I just don't think that's going to be, we're going to have a very disciplined conversation on future agenda items if that's the case. It's too easy of a trap to say, like, John, I would like, a study session on where you're drawing the boundary line for a particular school. So
I believe the board's policies state that the president and vice president work with the superintendent to set the agenda. Yeah. I don't believe that's the work of the overall board. And so in that, I believe board members would be saying, I would be interested in a study session on X. Mm-hmm. President may say, tell me more about that. Okay, thank you. We'll look at the work plan. Because any study session we add, we're either here on a Saturday morning or we're taking something else off. And so there's a decision point that has to be balanced. And so I don't think at that point in time it's the decision is being made, it's the request. And the other avenue is I'd like a study session. Well, could written follow-up also serve that purpose? So it's just taking because really it's all about information. What information does the board want? And so maybe we need to retitle this a bit.
I think review of future board business might encompass all that.
Okay. Thank you for calling out the faces I was making and making me talk aloud. Appreciate it, sir.
You have a very poor poker face. Okay. If there are no other items, the plan is to go forward with this proposed agenda structure for our September 11th school board meeting. There will be no committee updates, as the committee updates have not started. We might just post which board member is on which committee for that.
One thing,
Yes.
sorry, and I'll be quick, but just related to, I noticed, I guess it was up there, was that there's the formal board committees, so the Sustainability Policy Committee right now, and then and then the operational committees. I think we all understand that difference. I wonder if there's an opportunity just in introducing this section to sort of educate anybody who happens to be listening at 10:30 on a Monday night, just of what that distinction is. Because I've been kind of like over the last few days trying to wrap my own brain around it, and I think that's not clear to the community, and it just seems like a very natural opportunity. Also, so that people don't get confused of like, oh, I'm watching Leah engage with the sustainability policy and she's doing this, and then I'm watching her engage with highly capable, and we understand that those are two very different roles that you as a single person are playing. But just, there seems like there's a little bit of opportunity for some community education there.
Yeah, I think potentially also a written description on board docs that's publicly viewable as well. Makes sense. Okay. If there are no other questions or comments, then following today's study session, we have a study session and board meeting on September 11th. Since there are no other agenda items, the September 9th, 2023 study session is now adjourned. Thank you.